Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Good evening. We have some breaking news coming out of Iran. We have strikes from the United States to Iran. We have strikes on the coastal lines of Iran. Sorry, I missed the past couple of days. My dog actually got ran over by a truck, and the truck actually decided to take off instead of stopping. So I've been dealing with that, and the truck ran over my dog's jaw and broke my dog's jaw. So um, she had to get she had to get her jaw wired shut and everything. So just been dealing with that. So I apologize and just bear with me, please. Um, but we also have live footage, or not live footage, but videos of the strikes, and we have a bit of a show for you tonight. The past 48 hours has been really crazy. But I hope y'all enjoy the show. And further ado, let's get to the news.
Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer. We are seeing that right now, Iran's attacking with missiles inside of Jordan and an air base, and also the Gulf states as well. And on top of all that wild news, we're also seeing Russian forces start a limited retreat near Crimea, which is a massive situation as well. So today is news packed, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours, actually 48 hours, of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of some significant developments and transpiring developments that are happening within the Middle East at this moment right now. As we have been able to hear over the past 48 hours, the United States of America is now in the process of conducting 4 rounds of airstrikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran's coastline within the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of Oman, and the Persian Gulf, after the Islamic Republic of Iran's IRGC forces were able to down an AH-64 Longbow Apache within the area of the Strait of Hormuz earlier today. According to CENTCOM's reports, an autonomous drone vessel was able to recover the 2 pilots and return them back to safety, apparently near to the shore or to the U.S. Navy operating within the area. However, this has been used as a pretext for defensive strikes, which is the current definition of the actions being taken so far by U.S. military forces against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which we're still watching at this moment right now. The Islamic Republic of Iran did vow that they were going to be conducting retaliatory strikes against the United States of America and its allied Gulf state nations within the region, with some missile fire being reported near to the areas of Bahrain and Kuwait at this time, but we have not seen larger, broader strikes being conducted against U.S. forces in Qatar, Iraq, or Saudi Arabia, at least from what we're seeing right now. That might change in the middle of us being on air, as we are currently in the midst of these Iranian counterattacks, which are happening while we are live, meaning that at any moment we might have to break on air to the breaking news that will be coming out in real time live. However, we've also been able to see that there's been a decent amount of activities and actions conducted by the Islamic Republic of Iran within the western area of their country, and we've also been able to hear some mixed statements by the U.S. government, including the myriad of them, including the fact that the Islamic Republic of Iran doesn't really pose that much of a threat by shooting down the AH-64. There will be blood for the shooting down of the AH-64, and a myriad of other developments that we have been able to hear as well. But in the midst of this summary, we actually have some breaking news coming out on air right now. So what do we got?
Okay, so bear with us tonight, folks. We are currently going live with our normal coverage of the events that led up to these Iranian attacks on the Gulf states that are happening literally right this second. But right now, though, we're having to cover the attacks live. It's literally happening right now as we're on the air. Iran just got done launching a hell of a lot of missiles. They launched them first at Bahrain, and we have confirmation of a strike inside of Bahrain, perhaps at the 5th Fleet Naval Headquarters, currently in that area. So we'll get that video in just a second. But right now, the biggest story is we're seeing Iranian missiles apparently attacking the Muwafaq al-Salti air base inside of Jordan as of right this second. Apparently, Iran has launched missiles into the country of Jordan, and they're trying to hit the air base there, which I do believe it houses American aircraft that's currently there right now. So, Enforcer, take us through this right here. Apparently, it's a pretty big deal.
And here we can see the clips of the incoming missile fire being directed at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in the Kingdom of Jordan. The Muwafaq Salti Air Base is a significant base of operations for the United States Air Force within the area, with some electronic warfare units, air-to-ground units or multi-role units, and also some air superiority aircraft all being based around the area of Muwafaq Salti. We do understand that at this moment there is approximately 60 to 70 multi-role aircraft at the air base, and we can see in the distance here, most likely filmed from the city of the capital city of Jordan, that there are air defenses happening near to the area of the air base, just about 24 miles outside of the city to its east.
And also, by the way, we'll get through these videos first, but we even have the initial video of Iran firing the it appears to be the ballistic missiles they fired at this air base we're currently looking at. We have the origin of those missiles right there on video as well. After we get,
I apologize, y'all. Excuse me. Phone lines are open as well. We do live call-ins here on the show, so if you're just popping in, please smash that like button and share the video. And but anyways, we actually do shout outs, and you can do live call-ins, call in, talk about the news, or what you even know about is going on in the world that we're actually not even talking about. So it makes it kind of more interesting to actually have a news station where you can actually call in and actually talk to the host and be able to actually get your voice heard on live air. So the phone number is 540-251-7687. Again, that number is 540-251-7687.
get on with this.
And we can see the second clip here showing what appears to be MIM-104 or THAAD interceptors being launched into the air to intercept and shoot down the continued barrage of Iranian missiles which are reaching this airbase as we're live on air right now. This footage only came out just moments ago. We now hear the echo of the Patriot launching from its TEL in the distance there after we had already seen the missile pass on by. Additionally, we've also been able to see this third clip as well, once again showing the air defense situation around Muwafaq Salti and this large glowing orb in the sky, which might be the moon, but it's a little bit distorted because of the camera lens being used on this phone, I'm assuming. We could see a flash of a missile hitting an incoming Iranian missile that was heading on its way into the area. We can see that
It's very quiet for them to be intercepting stuff out here. You hear crickets, but you don't really hear the explosions from the interceptions. It's kind of weird.
It is really interesting. I think it's just because of the distance of the cameras. They don't hear the air defense alerts going off around Muwafaq, and also they probably don't hear the missile interceptors as well, because this might have been filmed on the hills surrounding the Jordanian capital, which isn't that far away, but it is far enough away that most of the sound would be muddled just from the mere distance alone. We also have been able to see, as Matthew was stating just a moment ago, the missiles that we can see right here, or at least the streaks of the missile launches that may have been fired towards the Muwafaq Salti air base just a little while ago, at least from some area of western Iran. So it does appear that there are continued short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missile launches that are happening live on air right now from the western region of the Islamic Republic of Iran as they are attempting to hit U.S. bases throughout the region. At the moment, considering that we're now hearing about the Muwafaq Salti air base coming under attack near to the Jordanian city of Azraq, we are generally getting an understanding that U.S. forces have come under attack within the Kingdom of Jordan, the Kingdom of Kuwait, and also the city-state or the Kingdom of Bahrain near to Manama. Likely targets that have been seen at this moment so far is the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters within Manama and the naval station, including the Ali al-Salim air base, which has come under significant attack as well, and now including the Muwafaq Salti air base, which we now have confirmed video and picture evidence of air defense occurring over the area. We now have more breaking news coming out at this moment. So what do we got?
Okay, so real quick, go to the likes tab. I don't think we can show this whole video. I just want to let you know that up front, by the way. We can show a still image, though, of the moment of impact. There was a whole bunch of ballistic missiles fired from Iranian territory at Manama, Bahrain, which is apparently home to the naval headquarters that the U.S. does operate out of that general area. So we did see an impact there. We saw a lot of interceptions over the skies of Bahrain, but it looks like one Iranian missile was able to make its way through, at least based on what we see here in this video. video. So, Enforcer, can you give us a slight geolocation? I'm not sure if it's totally possible from this video, but the flash is seen right at the very edge of the camera's view off in the distance in just a minute. And you should be able to see it right there with that arrow. There it is right there. That appears to be an explosion right there.
Well, we can actually geolocate this one pretty easily. This is actually one of the easiest ones I've seen so far. This is actually Manimal City, at least the Manimal City area. We can see the built-up skyscrapers and high-rises here along the coastline, and also the bridge that leads to the Bahrain International Airport. And unfortunately, I don't know the exact name of this island off the top of my head, but it appears that we're watching this from some angle near to this larger building around right here, or at least this series of larger buildings here, meaning that our vantage point is somewhere here to the north, and they're looking towards to the east, meaning that the explosion appears to have been near to the area of the Marina Beach Garden Park or the Funland Center bowling and ice skating rink, which also appears to be close to the point of this explosion. Once again, to show you all this, just for the geolocation's sake, there is the bridge leading to the island that the Bahrain International Airport is on in the distance. We can also see the high rises of the downtown area right here, and over here to the right, which would be something a little bit farther to the direct east, we can see that explosion there, which appears to have been conducted on the coast or on one of the buildings in that area, which would line up about exactly with this area right around here, around Marina Beach Garden Park.
Yeah, that's definitely, that's good geolocation right there, by the way. Also, I don't mean to jump off of this immediately. Of course, we are tracking that explosion in Bahrain that we just saw on the camera just right now. So obviously, there is apparently a hit that took place in Bahrain. But now we're getting breaking news right this very second that Kuwait is confirmed to be under Iranian attack as of right now. Of course, that's a neighboring country of the Gulf states. And we are seeing that air raid sirens are currently sounding inside of Kuwait as we speak. And it looks like Kuwait has just put out a statement about this right now. They say they're intercepting hostile aerial targets in accordance with operational procedures as of right this second. So we can confirm that Bahrain took a hit and now Kuwait is under attack as well. So we're assuming, well, actually, Enforcer, tell us what they might be trying to hit here, actually. And I'm just go ahead and give the folks that analysis.
There's a couple of critical infrastructure sites they could be hitting in the area, including the Kuwait International Airport, the Ali Al Salim Air Base, or Camp Buhring, which have generally become high priority targets in the past. Out of these attacks that we're seeing right now, it's much more likely that they're attempting to attack the Kuwait International Airport and Ali Al Salim.
Yeah, I would add that good analysis there too. But also, by the way, sorry if I sound distracted, folks. I'm trying to jump through several different sources right now to get information about this attack. But it does appear that Kuwait, like I said, is under attack. Bahrain's under attack. One thing I'm trying to figure out right now is the U.S. providing air defense support with F-16 fighter jets, or is the U.S. sitting back and letting the ground-based air interceptors that these Gulf states obviously operate, are they letting them handle it? Because it is interesting. CENTCOM claims that they ended their response on Iran about 30 minutes ago. But right now, we're seeing Iran launch a counterstrike on the Gulf states. We haven't seen Israel get attacked yet, so that's a bit of a distinction here. But I'm curious, is the U.S. going to launch a counterattack on Iran as a result of these attacks on the Gulf states? Enforcer, what do you think about that?
I would think that they're probably going to be launching some form of a minimal. I would actually re-ask that question again, because I think I'm misunderstanding something there.
I was saying here, do you think that the U.S. is going to launch a counterattack on Iran now that Iran has launched their attacks on the Gulf states?
Highly unlikely. They're probably looking at it, the U.S. position is probably that it's a saving face attack by the Iranians, and they don't want to jeopardize the ceasefire or the peace talks as a result of it. So we're probably going to see that the U.S.'s response to this current Iranian attack will most likely be non-existent because of their prior foreign policy position.
I wonder. I'm personally a little bit 50-50 on that one right there. Generally, the U.S. seems to take a very passive approach to these type of things, but they did say that earlier today about the Apache getting shot down, which we'll get to in just a minute. Apparently, the entire thing that sparked the U.S. strikes on Iran's coast was that there was a U.S. Apache helicopter that got shot down by an Iranian Shahed drone in the Strait of Hormuz, and luckily the pilot survived and they were recovered by the U.S. Navy. But that's what sparked this entire thing. So I don't know, like the U.S. said that wasn't a big deal earlier, and then they launched the strikes on the coast. So I'm kind of up in the air. I'm almost feeling like we're looking at the start of a coastal campaign against Iran by the United States. But once again, the U.S. is putting a lot of qualifiers on that. They're saying that this is simply defensive strikes, but these are some pretty damn large defensive strikes, I would say. And also, the event that caused all this is over with. The Apache got shot down this morning, so the self-defense argument's a little bit kind of weak. It seems offensive to me.
And of course, we are going to be getting into all of that. It looks like right now we might be getting a little bit of a break in the breaking news that's coming out, at least right now, so we will be getting into it. And I also want to make sure for everyone who's coming here tonight that y'all are going to be hearing about some other areas in the world way later on during the show. For right now, we're going to be covering pretty much primarily the Middle East, considering that it is a live, hot topic that is going on right now. But we also have a lot of major and critical news that came out of the war in Ukraine today, including one of the first major Russian retreats that we've seen because of a supply shortage in the southern front, along with major Ukrainian attacks that are still continuing deep inside of Russia. And we also have some updates on the Taiwan situation with the alleged Chinese naval policing action that's being conducted around Taiwan, and Taiwan's live fire exercise that's now being conducted ad hoc to be a direct response and deterrent to low-level coercion efforts by the People's Republic of China. So we will be getting into those stories later on tonight, but for now we're going to be staying primarily within the Middle East. Now that we have a bit of a break in the breaking news that is coming out right now, we're going to get to all of the other breaking news that's happened over the course of the day within the Middle East. As we have been able to hear that earlier on in the day, the United States of America did state that apparently a U.S. AH-64 Apache had been shot down. Maybe later. But according to the President of the United States, he stated the following: I've just been informed by our military that last night the Iranians shot down an Apache attack helicopter while patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz. There were 2 pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured. Nevertheless, the United States must, of necessity, respond to the attack, making it clear that the United States was going to be responding to the Iranian action against the AH-64 Apache that had been conducted. Later on, we were able to hear that the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi did state that a AH-64 Apache had been shot down by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and this was the statement from Tehran. The Strait of Hormuz is not international waters, but shared between Iran and Oman and located thousands of miles away from U.S. shores. Maritime boundaries are crystal clear. Our powerful armed forces are on constant alert for any violation of Iran's airspace, land, or waters. Foreign forces in proximity to our territory are at constant risk on account of their own human errors, plane accidents, or potentially being caught in crossfire. To reduce the risk, the best solution is for foreign forces to exit as soon as possible, and environments which will never be hospitable to a hostile presence. Iran prefers the language of diplomacy. However, as our brave warriors have shown to the world, we know how to speak other languages too, which is the language of war, which is what they're insinuating there. And that was then signed by Sayyids Abbas Araghchi, who is the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Generally, the story that we've heard so far is that the AH-64 Apache came under attack from some form of an Iranian drone, which apparently struck the tail assembly of the AH-64 Apache and sent it apparently in some sort of an uncontrollable spin due to it no longer having centrifugal force to stabilize the helicopter into the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, in which the pilots then bailed from the helicopter after the rotors had stalled, the main rotor had stalled, and then they were able to apparently float in the water until they were recovered later by an autonomous drone vehicle, which was then used to be able to recover the downed pilots. This does also confirm that the United States is using unmanned surface vessels within the Strait of Hormuz, which is something that we hadn't heard a whole lot about before, but apparently this one was only used for the recovery of the 2 operators of the Apache, including the Apache pilot and the weapon systems operator on board the Apache. From what we understand, many people have been stating throughout the day a lot of controversial and mixed statements about whether or not this information that has come out about how the Apache was taken down is true. And I would have to say, folks, that while we cannot make a definitive statement or claim as to how the Apache was shot down without verifiable picture and video evidence on air, we can say that the story is highly plausible. Many Russian helicopters, including Mi-28s and Ka-52s, along with Mi-24 Hinds, have been taken down in Ukraine in almost identical circumstances from smaller FPV drones and sometimes even larger drones when they're largely operating stationary or at slower speeds. The Apache attack helicopter can only travel at a maximum speed of 170 miles an hour, and that's when it's going all out in terms of trying to get some speed. Generally, Apache attack helicopters fly at a much slower speed of around 110 miles per hour to 90 miles an hour, meaning that an FPV drone with a speed of 130 miles per hour could easily catch up and possibly intercept an AH-64 Apache. Not only that, AH-64 Apaches, along with most modern helicopters, are not designed to be able to detect or warn the pilots and weapon systems operators on board of an incoming drone that is near to to the helicopter. There is absolutely no sensor systems on board that would give them a notification or warning that that is the case and that one is coming in. On top of that, if you look at the AH-64 Apache, the field of view for the weapons systems operator and the helicopter pilot is incredibly good when you're looking at the forward angle or to 90 degrees to the left and right, but visibility completely ceases once you start to look around a 110-degree angle towards the back of the helicopter, meaning that there is a significant blind spot at the rear of the helicopter, and if a drone is coming in anywhere from the rear of the helicopter towards the tail assembly, the pilots and the weapon systems operators are not going to be able to know that there is even a drone coming into the helicopter until the helicopter has been hit and taken down. To also further...
But don't they have radar, though, that can detect it? Like, even if they can't get a visual, like, on the drone coming in, don't they have something that would warn them? Now, obviously, a Shahed drone that Iran would launch would not be locking on with radar, so it's not going to set off that type of alarm in the cockpit, but it would at least, like, show up on their radar as, like, it would ping or something, wouldn't it?
No. So the AH-64 Apache actually doesn't have an air search radar or a normal, I guess you could say, aerial radar on board. The only radar the AH-64Ds have is this one up here, which is a longbow air-to-ground radar system. This is where the AH-64D gets the name, the longbow. This radar system is designed as a surface search radar mounted onto the top of the rotor assembly that is able to scan, I think, somewhere about 7 to 10 miles out on the ground for ground vehicles and surface targets, which gives it an ability to fire Hellfires from a concealed position or a largely obscured position, at least relative to enemy forces' direct line of sight. But they do not have any form of an air search radar, and if they did, most aircraft do not have an air search radar that would be looking backwards 180 degrees or directly behind the aircraft. They would most likely have a cone or an arc that's about 80 degrees at the front of the aircraft, but that would be about it. So generally, an Apache would have no way to detect an incoming drone like this.
That's just wildly shocking to me. I would have thought they had some way to detect it personally, but I guess it appears to be they don't. But also, by the way, I see some people asking about this. If it was a Shahed drone that hit this Apache, first of all, that's a bit of a feat. Like the Enforcer mentioned, we've seen it happen inside of Russia. Like Ukraine will use their drones to hit Russian helicopters. We've seen it happen to some of the Russian Alligator helicopters. They've been hit by drones mid-air while in flight, but that's extremely difficult to pull off. That is something that takes a hell of a lot of skill to even, target a helicopter with a manually operated drone like that, because they're not intended to hit air targets. Those drones are made to hit the ground. They're not made to hit helicopters that are obviously moving. They're not stationary. The Shahed drone is just about 8 feet in width. So it's about, one very tall person in width, basically. The width of the Apache is just about 17 feet wide. So it's an 8-foot wide drone hitting a 17-foot wide Apache. So I'll be honest with you, I'm having a little bit of a hard time believing it, to be honest, because either the Iranians are extremely good at piloting the Shahed drone or they use something else to take down the helicopter. I'm a little bit on the fence.
I would say that they definitely, well, not definitely, but they highly likely did use a drone to be able to conduct the attack against a helicopter, because it's not out of the question. We've seen this many times in the war in Ukraine, with the Ukrainians using a wide variety of different FPV drones to be able to conduct the strikes on the Russian helicopters, which at least, folks, I do have to say Russian helicopters qualitatively are far worse off than American helicopters, but in terms of their flight systems and also the field of view of their pilots, as far as a drone attack is concerned, they're actually analogous to each other. A Ka-52 and an Mi-28 are going to have about the same ability to be able to visually spot or be notified of an incoming threat like a drone to their helicopter, just as an Apache would. They're basically identical. There is no such thing as a drone detection and RWR system on board any of the current helicopters in service anywhere in the world. So I'm not saying that this is definitively what happened, because once again, we don't have video or picture evidence to confirm it, but it is a highly plausible story, especially given the kind of precedent and also cases that we have in Ukraine where similar such attacks have been conducted against Russian helicopters, sometimes operating at high rates of speed, near to the maximum speed of those helicopters' airframes, and yet they were still chased down, struck, and destroyed by Ukrainian drones. So it's not entirely out of the question, but still, we don't have enough proof to be able to confirm that that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, we know the Ukrainian operators are very, very competent. Like the Ukrainians have had years and years to hone their drone flying experience because you have to manually operate these drones. Like, for example, if they're trying to target a helicopter, that means some Iranian is sitting somewhere, likely in some Connex box somewhere, and they're piloting that thing manually into the Apache helicopter. So I have a hard time visualizing an Iranian drone pilot being that skilled to hit an Apache, unless the Apache was sitting stationary, like perhaps it was sitting there just hovering over the strait or something. Then I just have a hard time with it. We'll have to see.
And let's see here. Really quickly, I saw someone say that the longbow actually has a 360-degree field of view. And that is true, but once again, it's not for air targets. The Apache is made to engage and destroy ground targets. And there really is no helicopter out there in the world that has an air-based air-to-air radar on board. That's something that you would find on multi-role aircraft in the U.S. Air Force, like the F-16, or really any aircraft in the U.S. Air Force. They're going to have a radar that is tuned to operate to search for air targets, because that is their primary job. The primary job of a helicopter is to search for ground targets, and there is quite literally no reason for a helicopter, in real practical sense, to have an air search radar, because helicopters dogfighting other helicopters is completely unheard of. And on top of that, if you're in range of a helicopter's air defense systems, which are usually pylon-mounted man pads like the AIM-92 or the FEM-92, you're going to die. Like there's no guarantee, there's no real way to evade at that point. There isn't really a dogfight. If the other helicopter sees the other one first, they fire off an AIM-92, and that fight is over immediately as soon as that AIM-92 hits the other helicopter. So that's generally why they don't have any type of radar systems that are designed to detect air targets.
Now, not to rabbit hole too deep on this, but I did see Jay Bagwell in the live chat brought up a very good point. I actually forgot about this. He brought up something very interesting here. He said, didn't we recently see a Shahed drone with an air-to-air missile on board the Shahed itself? And I believe we saw something like that. Enforcer, did we see something like that?
Yeah, we did actually.
Ukraine.
That's a good point. Let me see if I can show y'all a Shahed with an R-73 attached. Here it is right here, actually. This is a downed Russian drone that had an R-73 air-to-air missile mounted on top.
Yeah, now granted, that is a Russian drone right there, but I mean, the Iranians could do the exact same thing. I mean, the Iranians are the one that literally produced, designed, and manufactured the Shahed drone. So it wouldn't be too hard for them, as the creators of it, to modify theirs to do the exact same thing the Russians have done. So maybe that's what the U.S. means by Shahed took down the helicopters. They fired a missile from the drone.
They could have. I mean, it's not out of the question. They certainly could have tried, and the Russians have been supplying them with an ample amount of R-73s. So it's not entirely out of the question that they could have conducted an attack with this as well. And generally, if a dogfighting missile like this is fired at a helicopter, it's over. Like, really, to be entirely honest with y'all folks, any short-range infrared-based missiles that are fired at anyone these days, manpad or aircraft-mounted like these would be, it's generally done and over with, unless you're pulling some sort of an absolutely insane high-G maneuver at a very short range, in which you might be able to avoid it. But even with chaff these days, most of these modern sorts of dogfighting missiles, even like the R-73, are pretty hard to avoid. I did see someone also mention, not to stay too long in this rabbit hole, but to cover this very thoroughly, someone did say to me that the Apache does have air-to-air capabilities, but air-to-air capabilities is a sliding scale. Like, for example, an M1A2 Abrams has anti-air capabilities, which is kind of shocking to hear. But when I tell y'all that it's just the 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the commander's cupola and the M240 that's mounted at the loader's cupola, then it kind of loses its curve or edge. It doesn't really sound that advanced because it's literally just a machine gun. The Apaches can carry AIM-60, well, actually, let's see, AIM-92s. And let me see if I can show y'all here, these mounted onto the side of an Apache. Let me see here. They're usually mounted on the very side of the wing pylons, which is not here, unfortunately. Let me see if I can show y'all one that has had this outfitted on it somewhere. This one actually doesn't have it either, interestingly enough. I'm trying to find y'all an image of this, because they can be mounted. And actually, here we go. Here's the Republic of Korea Army on the outer pylon of an Apache. This is where you can mount the AIM-92s, and they're actually mounted in a dual configuration on both sides of the pylons. You can actually see this one right here with what appears to be AIM-9Ls that were mounted, but that's most likely a test because that's not a common sort of a loadout. I've never heard of the Army using that. They use Stingers, but the Stingers can be mounted to the helicopter, but that does not mean that the AH-64 immediately becomes, Top Gun, Tom Cruise in a helicopter style sort of air defense. This thing is largely using the manpads like an infantryman would. If they visually spot something in the distance, they can turn on the AIM-92s and spool them up just like an infantryman would, and they'll hear the tone in the cockpit that the AIM-92 is hot and ready to fire, and they'll also hear the tone when it locks onto a target to be able to fire off that AIM-92. But outside of that, those manpads on those helicopters aren't operated like some sort of a super cyan, super spy movie sort of a deal. It's quite literally like an infantryman's carrying around 4 manpads. It's just happening that it's actually a helicopter instead, and it's flying around, but they have to operate the manpads just like the infantry would at that point from inside of the cockpit. So it has air-to-air capabilities, but it's not extremely competent, meaning that it's not the kind of thing that you want to send out for an air threat, even like a drone, because it's going to have a hard time spotting it, for one, because they have to spot it with the naked eye. There's no other way to detect them. And then secondly, they have to either shoot down the drone with the chain gun, which might be a little bit difficult for the firing computer to be able to calculate, or they'd have to try and lock onto it and shoot it down with a stinger, which might also be quite difficult as well, especially if the drone is incredibly close. So I hope that we've gone through all of the rabbit holes, at least on this hypothetical story that happened today. It is a highly plausible story, but I do want to make it clear, folks, that we do not have enough confirmation yet to say with absolute certainty, with video and picture evidence, that actually happened. All we know is that an Apache was taken down, and the weapon systems operator and the pilot was recovered. But beyond that, all the rest of the story, we don't have exact evidence and proof for. Outside of that, we did get to hear several different statements from the U.S. government today about the situation with the helicopter. And to guide y'all through a couple of these, we did get to hear that apparently CENTCOM did make a statement saying that the helicopter had been shot down and that they had started self-defense strikes as a response. Earlier in the day, we did get to hear that the U.S. Speaker, the U.S. House Speaker, did state that the strikes being conducted on Iran were defensive in nature, and even prior to that, the president stated to some news outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, that the downing of the Apache wasn't really that big of a deal. However, we did get to see that later on, much like we were recovering, the United States Central Command announced that we were conducting retaliatory defensive strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran for the downing of the AH-64 Apache. Additionally, we also were able to hear that, according to a U.S. official, they spoke to CNN and stated that the latest strikes were intended as warning shots to Iran and were not expected to derail negotiations to the ending of the conflict. At the moment, these strikes have been pretty significant and have hit Bandar Abbas, Sarik, Kashem, I believe Bandar-e-Khamir, and also Jam within the area of the Bushehr province, which is showing a very large catchment area for these strikes. Also, we've been able to hear that Bandar-e-Jask within the Gulf of Oman has also been hit as well, meaning that almost 2/3 of the entire Iranian coast, from end to end, from one strike at the most extreme end to the west to the most extreme strike to the east, have generally been conducted at a wide scale, a fairly large amount of them, to say the least. But a lot of people right now are talking about what they believe these strikes, these retaliatory strikes, are generally being conducted for, whether it's the start of a new U.S. military campaign against Iran, or whether these are going to be truly limited strikes for self-defense. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so what do you think the U.S. is currently doing with this right now? Because, of course, we did see that as a result of all these U.S. strikes that we just saw, 3+ rounds of them, by the way, on Iranian territory, that was in response to the Apache getting shot down earlier today by the Iranian forces. So I'm glad to see the U.S. responded to it, because I was worried for a second that the U.S. was going to let our Apache get shot down, and also our pilots also almost get killed in that strike and not do anything about it. But thankfully, they have responded in a pretty strong way, I will say. So what is it really about? 51% said it is true. It is simply limited self-defense strikes, like CENTCOM is claiming it is, while 28% said it's the start of a new U.S. campaign against Iran, and 12% said I'm 50-50 on the question. And I would say I'm actually 50-50 on this for a couple different reasons. Number one, these are much more than self-defense strikes. These are very large and very widespread strikes all along Iran's coastline. So we've seen that Avaz has been hit, which is one of the largest oil fields inside of Iran. That was a very big strike we just saw. Also, a whole bunch of radar installations have been decimated by the U.S. forces this evening. And we've also seen other strikes on Qasem Island, which is the toll booth that Iran uses to tax the ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. So I would say this. It seems to me like the U.S. wants to start a new campaign at this point, and the Apache might have be what tipped them over the edge, basically. But they're still wrangling with the legality issue in the Congress because right now there's a war powers resolution that just passed about a day or two ago, or at least it got advanced, that was basically saying that they are not in favor of continuing hostilities against Iran. So the administration is very concerned that they don't have enough support in the Senate to keep this war going. So they're trying to create a defensive reason to start striking the coast. The Apache gave them the perfect reason to restart these strikes, which is exactly what they did this evening. So that's why I'm 50-50 on it. It's self-defense, but it's also a little bit more than that, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that's largely a mix as well. It's largely trying to get into near offensive actions while trying to phrase the action and also limit its scope to being argued as a defensive action. We have been able to hear that the Senate is largely looking to be far less supportive of the conflict than the House of Representatives, even, where in the House right now, if all representatives were present voting on limitations via the War Powers resolution, then we would actually be seeing that it's almost split down the middle right now within the House of Representatives. In the Senate, however, it does appear that most of these senators are actually leaning towards limiting the actions of the president on continuing the conflict against Iran. And if there is ever actions conducted by the executive branch at the moment that largely appear to be more so defensive than merely defensive, then that will trigger, it will have to trigger at that point some form of a vote on the War Powers Act and the War Powers Resolution Act to see whether or not the war powers are going to be limited. We would most likely see that the House would be split, much like we've almost already seen already, but the Senate would largely start to move towards the idea of actually limiting the president's authority, meaning that this thing would start to come to a close by default, which would not be in the best U.S. interest at the moment, but nevertheless, that's how the vote would go. The president would automatically veto that if it even made it to the president's desk, but then we would see that it would get shot back to the Congress again, and the House and the Senate would have to vote on it a second time, and it would either get shot down in the Senate at that point, or it would get approved in the Senate. We're not sure how that would go at that point. We might see that a lot of people a lot of representatives might actually start to see that they get offended that the president shot it down, and depending on the president's response publicly and how venomous or fire-filled it is, we might see that a lot of them actually vote to limit the powers just to check the president, and then it might go to the Senate, get voted in again to limit the powers of the president. If they get a two-thirds majority in both the House and the Senate, which still would be quite difficult but plausible in that sort of a scenario, that would actually largely end the conflict outright, and the U.S. would have to start withdrawing from the region, which would be a complete strategic defeat for the United States. So right now, they're trying to game that out, it appears. So with that limitation in mind, they're trying to conduct the broadest strikes they can while still keeping them defensive. And that's why we're seeing that this is such a wide scoping attack over the course of this day, from Bandar-e-Jask all the way to Jam and the Bushehr province, is because they're trying to get as close as they can to conducting offensive military actions without crossing the threshold, which will require a War Powers Resolution Act vote in the Congress.
Yeah, I think that's what's holding them up right now. I was a little bit on the fence about that until today, but I did see that the Speaker of the House, he came out today like you were covering a minute ago, and he made a statement specifically saying that the administration assured him that these were only defensive strikes that were taking place on Iran. So the administration is going through hoops galore trying to make sure that they're framing this as purely defensive, which indicates to me that they are very concerned they do not have enough support in the Senate, which I'll be honest, folks, I'm a little bit shocked by that because I thought that the Senate would be supporting the situation, because I would imagine that the senators, generally being pretty knowledgeable about the situation, would understand that we simply can't just call the war off at this point. We're too deep. We got to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But for some reason, there's apparently not enough senators to keep supporting the war. At least that's what I'm getting out of it.
Well, I would say that they're probably not that well informed, because we have been hearing a lot of reports over the past few weeks, and of course, folks, at this point, we have to get involved in the machinations and actions of the government, because this is now important to what we're covering. So we're going to keep it as apolitical as possible, but we're also going to cover it as well in its full depth. We have been able to hear that there's been a lot of complaints from representatives and senators that the executive branch is hardly keeping any of them in the know on what's exactly going on, like, for example, the armed services committees within the Senate and the House, and also other committees that are involved in national defense, national security, and generally just a wider body of the elected constituents of the representatives and the Senate, have not really been discussed or briefed on exactly what's going on and why it would be beneficial or pertinent to U.S. national security or strategic interests to be able to continue military actions. And due to that general void of information, this is probably leading a lot of senators and representatives to largely just rely on gut intuition, or largely what they're thinking of the conflict, more so than what they're being briefed on and what the strategic parameters, what the strategic conditions and situation looks like to be able to make their decision, which is why we might be seeing a lot of senators leaning on hesitancy, because due to the fact that they aren't really being briefed or notified of a lot of the U.S.'s actions or why they're being conducted this way, they might be leaning into hesitancy or just generally getting a bad gut feeling that things aren't really going that well, and the conflict might need to be ended because they're not getting any information to even let them know how the conflict is actually going to be turning out in the long run, whether it looks positive, whether it looks like it's middling, or whether it might end up in an absolute defeat if the conflict continues.
Maybe so, I guess. I'm just sort of at a loss for why the Senate wouldn't be supporting, finishing the job. I'm kind of at a loss for that. Now, I can understand if they didn't want the thing to start. Like there was an argument on both sides of that coin right there, but we're already in it at this point. So to simply say, let's just end it and just leave it a broken mess, that seems like a strange position to take at this point, considering that would pretty much mean economic ruin, not just for the United States, but also for Europe, for Asia, for pretty much everybody for the most part. So I guess we'll just have to see how it goes. But I think that's why they're currently having a hard time, getting the situation rolling again with Iran, as it must be. They are concerned they don't have support.
And the problem is that they probably would get some support if they'd actually bring some of the senators and representatives into the skiffs at the Capitol and start to brief them on what's going on and why the conflict has to continue because of the current position that it's in, with the actual information, intelligence, and data that they have from the Department of Defense. But at the moment, it appears that the executive is incredibly hesitant to conduct an action like that because they believe that is largely having to step down to the level of the commoner. And I'm not saying this in any degrading way. This is just the way they appear to be taking the situation. This is having to step down to the level of a commoner, and it's putting them below other people to where they have to treat them as equals and actually explain to them and try and basically sell the idea to them that they have to continue the war. And we don't believe that those briefings will ever be given to the Senate and the House, and that's why we're currently caught in the limbo we're in right now. But we actually have some more breaking news coming out of the area. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we are hearing right now that sirens are sounding yet again in Bahrain. This is the second wave of ballistic missiles that are being fired at Bahrain. We did confirm one impact on the ground, presumably right near the naval headquarters inside of Bahrain that the U.S. operates out of, or at least they did before. I'm not sure if they're there now, but we're seeing that the Iranian forces are attacking Bahrain for the second time. The air raid sirens are sounding, and we are expecting imminent ballistic missile, possibly interceptions, hopefully not impacts, but we are expecting that right now. So I would not be surprised to see the other Gulf states like Kuwait and etc. start to get hit yet again. I would not be surprised to see that because apparently Iran is not finished. They're launching multiple waves of strikes even right now.
And that is quite interesting to see. Hopefully we'll be getting out some footage here soon of the situation in Bahrain. It does appear that they are now coming under attack again, and the Iranians are most likely attempting to hit and further pummel the already destroyed 5th Fleet headquarters at the U.S. Naval Station inside of Bahrain. I do see a lot of people right now talking, to just jump back really quickly to the internal political situation in the United States of America between the Congress and the President, and I've seen a lot of people say that the Senate shouldn't be told squat, and they should do what they're told. The problem with that, folks, is that the Senate, it has a right and a duty to be informed of the actions of the executive branch, as it is actually the Congress that largely holds and is vested with the power of the citizenry to be able to make larger actions and to make the decisions of the United States of America. The executive branch is called the executive branch because it executes the laws of the Union as laid out by the Congress's votes, meaning that the Congress has to be notified of situations and heavily appraised because that is their role. I see a lot of people saying that the Senate cannot be entrusted with critical or secretive information of the U.S. government, and I'm not really understanding that position because it's largely eroding the entire constitutional principle of the United States of America. If the Senate can't be trusted with classified information, the President can't be trusted with classified information either. And then we're at an impasse because the entire system of government that we have and operate off of doesn't exist anymore and is completely crumbled away, and we've largely put the powers of the entirety of the country in a dictatorship in the White House, because they're the only ones who have the ability or the power to make decisions and the knowledge to also make and follow through on those decisions as well. So the Senate and the House does have a duty by the Constitution to be notified of what's going on, and if they feel, because of the lack of information that they have, that the war isn't fruitful to continue, then their votes will be swayed based off of the lack of information that they're getting, and largely the disrespect that the Congress is getting as well. So I hate to tell you all this, but that is the way the Constitution outlines the way the government's supposed to operate, and that's why they have a duty to be informed. Also, on top of that, if they leak that information, that's a humongous criminal violation of U.S. code, and they could be prosecuted for that, which generally makes them a lot more hesitant to leak out classified information like that. But we actually have more breaking news coming out at this moment, most likely from Bahrain. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so I'm also hearing some preliminary information that while Bahrain is currently under air attack from the looks of it, it sounds like, or at least I'm getting preliminary reports that Kuwait is once again under attack, but I don't have the official statement about that, but I'm hearing some eyewitnesses on the ground say that they're hearing explosions in Kuwait. So I haven't heard the air raid sirens go off, so maybe they just haven't sounded them or something. I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but I was expecting that Kuwait was going to get attacked again. If they're doing a second wave in Bahrain, then naturally they're going to attack probably Kuwait again. They appear to be targeting both of those because both of those Gulf states house U.S. forces, and that's who they're currently going after. So we are hearing as well some more information about the last wave of Iranian attacks in the Gulf states. According to a U.S. official, at least 4 ballistic missiles and several drones were launched by Iran at U.S. bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. So that appears to be what they're going for exactly. They're going only for the U.S. bases in those countries, and also inside of Jordan as well, outside the Gulf states. So they're saying 4 ballistics. I could have sworn, though, I saw a lot more than 4 explosions happening over those states. I saw like 10 explosions over Bahrain, and also in Kuwait. I can't remember how many I saw there, but it was a lot more than just 4. So, Enforcer, what do you make of that?
It sounds to me like they're downplaying the amount of missiles that were fired to once again downplay the severity of the Iranian actions, mostly to try and keep the ceasefire ongoing, to make it seem like it's not that big of a deal. But we did see quite a large number of interceptions, far more than 4 in the air over Kuwait, actually over Bahrain alone. And we haven't gotten any footage out of Kuwait either yet to be able to even see what's going on over Kuwait at the moment, which had to have been a good bit more missiles than just 4 if we're counting all of them in one big lot.
Yeah, I will say this. It is interesting that apparently Iran is not hitting these Gulf states' infrastructure. They're also not hitting any territory that's just simply of the Gulf states alone. It appears to be they're targeting every single missile and drone that they're firing just at the American forces, which is unusual than the last time, of course, because the last time Iran struck the Gulf states, they were hitting anything they could possibly hit. This time, they're just going for America, which is different. So not that makes it any better, by the way. It's still an attack on their airspace. So, I mean, they still got to respond to it, or at least you'd hope they would respond to it. But that's the question right now. Is the U.S. going to counterattack as a result of this and claim defense? Because they could. I mean, right now, Iran's clearly aggressing against the Gulf states. So they could hit Iran again and say it's defensive.
They could try and hit Iran again, and they might actually use this possibly as a justification, but that would probably be a little unlikely because they've laid out the prior precedent that attacks on U.S. bases on foreign soil generally aren't qualifying sort of a denominator to conduct retaliatory attacks against Iran. And in some few cases, they've almost made the connection, but they never have done that directly. So I'm not sure if they would do that in this moment right now because they generally have not done that over the past few months during the alleged ceasefire that we're still watching raging across the Middle East, as a lot of people are now saying. But outside of that, I hope we've addressed this situation somewhat well that we're watching right now, and we'll probably still be getting more developments and updates on the situation as they continue to come out, because just to remind everyone, once again, especially if you're joining us right now, the 22,000 people who are here live, we are covering the entirety of the news of the past 48 hours and also the breaking news that's coming out on air right now. So we're trying to juggle everything of all of the news that has happened and the news that is happening. So we're still in the midst of gathering that information and putting it out on air. So it's still a little bit of an irregular sort of a news schedule tonight because we're covering things that have happened and things that are happening simultaneously. But moving us on out of this bit of news right here, it is time for us to move on into some further news of the U.S. strikes and the reports of strikes that we got along the Iranian coast. To largely belt these off quickly, we did get get to hear that there were sounds of explosions in the Josk County around Bandar-e-Josk. We also heard of explosions near to the IRGC naval port of Surik. We also were able to hear of a significant number of waves of attacks against the island of Kashem. We could cover each and every one of these individually, but largely there was 4 airstrike waves that have been conducted against Iran. Every single one of the 4 hit Kashem, and each strike wave would hit a different area on the mainland. I believe the first wave hit around Bandar Abbas, the second wave hit Surik, the third Bandar-e-Josk, and the fourth hit somewhere in the Jam region. That every single one of the waves did hit somewhere on Kashem Island. We've additionally been able to hear from the Iranian position as well, a decent amount of threats that have come out throughout the course of the day, which largely are giving us the idea that any statements by the United States government that they're very close to a deal are once again largely fruitless and more so fanciful than anything, because the public Iranian statements are still showing a largely jingoist sort of a mindset, and one that is aggressive towards the United States and any attempt at compromise in diplomatic resolution. We did get to hear that Ghalibaf did state, once again to restate this larger letter that was put out earlier, we prefer the language of diplomacy, but we speak other languages far more fluently. Break your commitments and we'll switch to what we speak best. You ride the horse you saddled. That was one of the statements by Ghalibaf earlier, who is a fairly significant voice of the IRGC and the Iranian government in the meantime, and we can still see that they are threatening acts of war against the United States of America and the Gulf states in the region, along with the state of Israel, which is largely giving us an idea that the peace deal is not around the corner like the U.S. government is stating. We also been able to see some additional Iranian statements as well from Abbas Arachi, where he said, despite its defeat on the battlefield, and this is Abbas Arachi's claims, not ours, despite its defeats on the battlefield, the U.S. opted to test our determination. Our powerful armed forces will leave no attack or threat unanswered. Leave our region if you want to be safe. The history of the Persian Gulf has many chapters on dire fates of intruding outsiders. Once again, making it incredibly clear that they are still working off of a jingoist and aggressive sort of a mindset against the United States of America, which does not appear to be reconciliatory or getting anywhere close to conducting or showing acts of good faith that would represent they're willing to enter a peace deal with the United States. The Iranians did once again reiterate that they will be conducting aggressive actions, as the Iranians stated, according to Tasnim News, that Iran, as it warned a few hours ago, will give a definitive response to U.S. aggression, which is being carried out under the pretext of the Apache helicopter crash, with the Iranians now claiming in this statement that the Apache was not hit by an Iranian drone and was in fact a crash somewhere within the Hormuz. They then further stated that no threat will be left unanswered. So, largely showing us right now that the Iranians have made it incredibly clear that they view the actions of the U.S. along their coastline as an action that must be responded to. And we've already seen that at this moment live on air, they are firing at what appears to be U.S. bases and forces throughout the Middle East. We saw an attack earlier on at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, just outside the capital city of Amman, about 30 miles east. We've also seen what appears to be possible attacks at the Ali Al Salim Air Base, Camp Buhring, and the Kuwait International Airport within the Kingdom of Kuwait. And we've also seen what appears to be missile strikes attempting to attack the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters and naval station that's operated out of Bahrain. All of that happening live on air. So it does show us right now that the Iranians are in fact responding and are following through with their threats, which largely appear to us to be showing that the Iranians are still not willing to enter any sort of a peace deal. And right now we actually have even more breaking news coming out. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we've gotten some video this time, and I'm glad we finally have some video because, of course, pictures tell us a little bit, but the video tells us a little bit more. So we've gotten 2 videos. First of all, let's start with our first one. The Patriot SAM system was seen intercepting Iranian ballistic missiles over Bahrain apparently just a short while ago. So it's a more close-up view of the Patriot in action, just to let y'all see what that looks like if you want to take a peek.
And here are the interceptors being fired.
Did they put a slow-mo effect on this video or something? Why am I hearing like the noise in like slow-mo?
I think they did because that missile is moving incredibly slow.
This is the glitchiest video ever, but I mean, there's a bird too, but hey, that caught me off guard. I thought it was some projectile coming in.
Y'all have heard of filmed on iPhone before. Now we have the brand new film by a Nokia here on this clip. Additionally, moving us on from this clip, we also get to see what appears to be another explosion, largely confirming our analysis that we've been making on air on the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters again, showing that this was one of the targets that was attacked. And there's the brief flash right there.
Yeah, that looks like the exact same flash that we saw from the aerial camera, or at least from the higher camera on the side of a building that we saw earlier. That seems to match up with the same size of explosion.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, folks, I think that the U.S. Fifth Fleet's headquarters is somewhere, and I'm trying to make sure that I get this correct. It's somewhere within the naval yards out here in the. Actually, hold up, correction. I believe that, yeah, actually, this is the Fifth Fleet's headquarters right here. And you can actually see on the satellite photography that was made and published during this moment in time that there actually was some U.S. Navy guided missile destroyers here at the moment, because this is also a joint Bahraini American base that's operated within this area. You can also see a couple of Arleigh Burkes here as well, and a couple of other U.S. support vessels. So this is the area of the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters. To let y'all know, a direct hit is not going to be leading to most likely any casualties to speak of, because the Fifth Fleet headquarters has been abandoned largely for months now, almost in entirety of 4 months at this point. An evacuation was conducted very early on before the war even started in the middle of actually mid-February, and we saw that almost all U.S. naval personnel that were working at this headquarters were removed from the region, and we understand that the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet is now being operated remotely from a headquarters here within the United States. Also, all U.S. Navy surface vessels also left the area as well, meaning that this area has been completely abandoned. Still, Iran does pick this as one of their top targets to hit whenever they conduct retaliatory strikes, which we largely believe is for a symbolic purpose more than causing physical damage, because we know that most of the buildings at Fifth Fleet have been destroyed for months now. They were blown up in one of the opening attacks by the Iranians, meaning that they're hitting basically rubble at this point, and there's only a skeleton crew of naval personnel and other U.S. military personnel at this base, and they largely hunker down in the ready shelters whenever it even looks like the Iranians might fire, meaning the casualties would be incredibly minimal as a percentage chance, and we would also understand that there is no further damage to be caused to the facility because most of the facility has already been destroyed.
Yeah, and also, by the way, it appears to be, like you were saying there, Fifth Fleet headquarters only has what they call mission critical staffing. So, like you said, a skeleton crew that's currently there. And they're simply there to oversee the localized infrastructure impacts in the area, basically. So it sounds to me like they're simply there just to say, we have people there to a large degree. So there's no ships here? Is that what you're saying as well?
Yeah, there's no ships. There's nothing. They got all the ships out of there way early on and sent them out into the Arabian Sea. So that way they wouldn't be stuck like fish in a barrel if they needed to leave later on and it became impossible, because that would be an absolutely horrendous position for a couple of our vessels, especially what we could kind of almost call capital ships like Burkes would be in. Although, by the way, folks, I do have to say, Burkes are not capital ships by definition. They're destroyers, which generally aren't considered that. But considering that each Arleigh Burke cost about $4 billion to build, I would say they're capital ships at that point, because they're about half the cost of an aircraft carrier. So we don't want, $12 billion of Arleigh Burkes stuck in the middle of the Persian Gulf with no way to get out in a hypothetical scenario. So they were all evacuated prior. I don't believe there's anything here except for maybe like a couple of Coast Guard cutters, base security, and a couple of people to just maintain and keep the base slightly operational, just in the advent in case of it needed to be brought back online, which is now impossible because the actual headquarters buildings and a couple of other of the critical structures have been destroyed already.
Yeah, and I can confirm that on February the 26th, there was a whole bunch of reporting that the U.S. Navy had already withdrawn all of its vessels from the Bahrain base that we're currently looking at right here, Fifth Fleet headquarters, and that was way back in February 26th, excuse me. So they've been gone for a minute, and they haven't ever come back to that base. So that appears to be definitely confirmed.
Yeah, so generally there's not really a lot of damage assessments that we can give for Fifth Fleet. It's not like we've lost anything here. Everything that was probably hit right now was lost already months ago, and written off as complete losses, literally. So there's not really much here to speak of, rather than the Iranians hit it probably just as a symbolic act to save face, I suppose, because there's not any direct material damage that they can cause further than they have already. So moving us on out of that strike in Bahrain and what we're watching right there on that clip, we have also been able to hear that Kuwait has come under attack several times over the course of the day. We haven't gotten any videos or picture of evidence, unfortunately, to be able to show exactly what's happened in the area. We're believing that they're attacking either the Kuwaiti International Airport or Ali Al Salim again, as statistically, those are pretty much the only targets that they're hitting at this point inside of Kuwait. Moving us on out of Kuwait, we've also been able to see some very interesting developments along the western regions of the Islamic Republic of Iran leading up to our news today, which was quite interesting to see. Reports of explosions did come out within the Avaj region. We don't really know what's what's going on here, to be entirely honest with y'all folks. We haven't got any video or picture evidence confirming U.S. strikes in this area, and also these are well out of the range and scope of the U.S.'s strikes that are being conducted along the coastline right now. Before we get on into the rest of the news, deeper on north within the western area of the Iranian borders, we do have a lot of people talking about what the probability is going to be of the Iranians striking Israel again here in the very near future. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so far, like we've gone over before, Iran is just generally keeping its attacks to the U.S. bases right now, and they say they're going to be decisive with it. But I'll say this right now: Iran is flexing their muscles for whatever it's worth right now, but they're really not doing a whole bunch of damage from the looks of it. They did have an impact at our very lightly manned base in Bahrain. And of course, it is a hit nonetheless, but there's not a whole bunch of stuff there really. So not very decisive. But what's going to happen next? Will Israel get it, or what's going to happen? 43% said Iran will strike Israel very soon. They're getting around to it again. 32% said Iran will only strike U.S. bases. And 16% said Iran really doesn't want to do too much, but they need to make it seem like they're ready to go. And I would say this. Israel is more feared at this point than the United States. I think that's what's happening right now. Iran knows that the U.S. largely held Netanyahu back during this last round of attacks on Israel, and we had heard reports this morning that apparently Netanyahu held off on sending a whole bunch of Israeli fighter jets to go hit Iran for another round, right as the U.S. president called him during the end of the recent spat. So to me, it seems like Iran thinks they can strike the United States forces at our U.S. bases and generally get away with it, but they don't want to hit Israel because they think that they're probably not going to get away with that. So I think they're going to hold off on Israel. Now, if they do it, I wouldn't be too shocked, but I think they might hold off. That's my guess. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I think that the Iranians are probably just going to be trying to strike U.S. bases, because right now the Iranian strategic position is one that is incredibly advantageous to them and incredibly disadvantageous to us. And as long as they play their cards well, they can conduct these saving face attacks and generally avoid being directly hit or directly dragged back into a conflict, while also making the United States look strategically like a joke and also inflicting some economic damage. Considering that the Iranians are not conducting any direct offensive attacks against the United States, that could largely lead the United States into justifying a continuation of hostilities due to a defensive action that would largely be argued. They are able to ensure that their blockade on the Strait of Hormuz is generally unchallenged due to the holdup that's now being conducted within the Congress, and this will further start to force the United States into a worse position, at least strategically, because the United States and most of the Western world will continue to see that oil resources will probably start to rise in price once they physically run out. I don't think they're going to be rising rapidly until then, and once it gets to that point, it's going to be like hitting a stone wall, and the prices will start to skyrocket just because the physical availability is no longer there to trade it like crypto. And once we start to see that, the United States will largely be forced to accept any and all Iranian demands that they make without there really even being any actual consideration, at least on the U.S.'s end, of what would be reasonable, what wouldn't be, because they would just be trying to relieve the significant economic strain and pressure that would be caused to the United States at that point. So as long as they play their cards and they only attack forces that can be attacked without any major responses being caused as a result, they can generally just game this thing out and wait it out until the United States is forced to accept their demands, because at this point there's really no reason for them to even negotiate with the United States. They have all of the hand, because right now, considering that it's not a kinetic armed conflict, the entire war is being fought in every single way that isn't direct military action, and one of the most important ways is economically, and that comes down to who is damaging the worst economically, the Islamic Republic of Iran or the United States. And right now I would say that there is a really strong argument to be made, and could be made for months now, that the Iranians are clearly damaging the Western economic sphere more so than the U.S. is able to damage them economically. So if they're able to wait it out, they'll get what they want, and that's why we've been a huge proponent at this point of resuming military actions with the specific focus of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, because we do not reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians will wait this out and they will achieve a victory via economic strangulation. And I would generally like to avoid any U.S. defeats, especially at the hands of what I would consider to be a militarily inept and politically incompetent country like the Islamic Republic of Iran, as they'll be losing us a lot of face on the world stage as a significant military power, and it also will be losing us a lot of hand that we have in the Middle East with our Gulf state allies, which will most likely basically start to either chum up to the Iranians to see deference so that way they can use the Strait of Hormuz, or they might start to move towards the People's Republic of China, which is the larger power player within the Iranian sphere of influence, because the Chinese are the ones that largely support the entirety of the Axis powers, and we can see that the United States starts to completely lose control of the Middle East within the decade to follow if we end up with a strategic defeat due to Iranian economic strangulation. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know at the moment right now, but that's why we're pretty significant advocates of continued military action, and I would wish that the United States executive branch would start to brief the Congress, especially those in the House of Representatives and the Senate, of the situation in real form with actual intelligence and data that they have to be able to back up that claim, because it's an accurate one, to be able to see that they actually vote to approve the continuation of the conflict and to largely unbind the hands of the United States, so that way we can resolve the conflict in a beneficial way that ends up at least in some form of a Pyrrhic victory for the United States, if not a total victory if the situation was handled properly. But moving us on out of that bit of news and that poll, we also been able to hear of some other developments within the area of Iran, as we were able to see some footage of the Iranians via Tasnim News preparing the rockets that they were going to be launching, which they have now launched throughout the region against the United States of America's bases and also the Gulf states. And we see them here just hanging out around the rockets in the tunnels. The rockets appearing to be on some sort of roller carts to be loaded onto trailers or TELs. And we see them removing some of the I believe they're called tabs on the missiles to prepare them to be loaded onto a TEL, and also doing some other pre-inspection checks.
Wow. What, you got a Rollie on? What is that, a Rolex?
That's actually a Bolex, man. They don't have the money for Rollies in Iran.
Man, I don't know what that is. I'm not a watch expert, so I don't know, but maybe someone who knows watches can tell us what kind of watch that is right there. That doesn't look like a Timex.
Doesn't look like one to me. I'm still wearing a Citizen, folks, and my Citizen is absolutely spent. I'm going to have to get a new watch here soon. But we can see them continuing to prepare the missiles, largely just showing off missile aeronica is the best way to explain it, and just showing them preparing the missiles for launch, and also showing the large industrial crane operator control that they have, apparently to be able to move the rockets within the tunnel, I'm supposing.
Oh, this is real dramatic right here. I'm sure the music's probably highly dramatic too. Oh, look, he's writing on it with a Sharpie. They're putting the propaganda on the side of it.
You want to bet?
Come on.
Yeah, that music is awesome.
Man. Oh man, that's pretty bad.
We see them here writing some tiny inscription on the rocket. It's probably something like "Inshallah, we shall defeat you" in the name of something like that. I'm very sure. I do have to say though, the handwriting's actually pretty decent. I'm not going to lie; like that's actually pretty decent writing for Arabic. This guy could probably go and teach calligraphy, but instead he's in the IRGC. Very unfortunate.
That's a powerful, marker right there. I think it's got some real boldness behind it.
Man, that thing's got some toxic black ink in it. I bet if you, press that to someone's arm, the ink would just, burn straight through it. There would just be a hole in their arm after, a couple of minutes. I mean, that stuff looks like it's going to stick. Even after this thing launches, that stuff will still be readable.
It's kind of hard to believe they have guys just sitting down here writing propaganda on the side of the missile. It's like nobody's going to read this. It's like the missile is designed to explode. It's not like it stays intact unless they're planning on the thing malfunctioning.
Man, they're planning on it smacking down tail end up on a U.S. base, and a U.S. soldier gets to read the side of it before it explodes like a Looney Tunes cartoon, I'm guessing, because I don't really know where in the world anyone's ever going to read this stuff. On Ukrainian drones, it makes sense because they're going slow enough and they're flying low enough that you might actually be able to read it if it's large print. These things are flying at Mach 5, though. So, well, not Mach 5, but Mach 2 or Mach 3. So I'm not really getting the whole point of writing the stuff because I don't know about y'all, but I'm not really a speed reader. I don't think I can read a text going by at Mach 2 or Mach 3 from a mile away. That's a little bit tough, but we could see, let's see.
This is what they wrote.
And, in the name of all 40,000 innocent victims martyred in Gaza. Isn't that martyred in Iran? I mean, didn't they wipe out 40,000 of their own people in January?
I think so. Also, is October the 7th the day that they conducted that terror attack on Israel?
Yeah, that's the day that Hamas stormed across the border and did their massacre on 2,000 Israelis.
Oh, So they're literally saying that after they conducted their terror attack on Israel and then Israel responded, they're saying that they're doing this for that. It's like, well, you attacked Israel. It's like, I don't now. Obviously, I don't endorse like hurting civilians, obviously, but I'm like, what the hell like logic is this? You don't attack Israel and then complain that they responded.
Yeah, I would have to say, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I guess that's what they have. Also, I like how they put that in English just for the foreign audiences. I know they have a picture of this guy. Oh, man, that's Nasrallah, I believe. They really did a lot of Photoshop to him, though. And now you can see them rolling out the TELs for the strikes that they have now conducted while we were on air. But moving us on out of that lengthy clip, we also were able to see that apparently there were some sort of tunnels that the IRGC were hiding in the Loristan province near to Karamabad, which we're able to see here. And we also were able to see additionally that there were some missile launches as well within the area of Ali Gudaraz within western Iran, which we saw in this clip. There's the tail end of the rocket firing into the distance. We also were able to get some further clips near to Hamidan of apparently reports of air defense coming out over the area. And so it does appear that that is the case, at least at the moment. We also were able to hear that apparently something was heading east over Tehran, which we saw right here. We believe this might be an Iranian military aircraft. And that's the end of that clip. But moving us on out of the Islamic Republic of Iran, there's also been additional details that have happened over the past 48 hours inside the state of Israel. But before we get to that, we actually have more breaking news coming out at this moment. So what do we got?
Okay, so first of all, I'm seeing something interesting here. We have a B-52 Stratofortress that just showed up on ADSB data right now. It appears to be en route to the United Kingdom right now. I'm not sure if we can make any concrete conclusions off of this at the moment. It could be maybe something unrelated to Iran, but I will say this. The last time we saw the B-52s make strikes on Iran and drop bombs on them, we did see that I believe the B-52s were stationed out of the UK, or they at least landed there at some point. So, Enforcer, what are you making out of this right here? Is there just one, or is there multiple, or maybe they have their ADSB turned off?
It looks like it's just one of them for now. It might be involved in a training operation in Europe, maybe, but it might also be involved in heading down to CENTCOM. We'll generally have to see where it's heading from here. It looks like it's actually heading right now for somewhere around RAF Fairford, although it is keeping a stable altitude at this point over the United Kingdom, so I'm not entirely sure on that. It may actually be heading somewhere into Germany. It's just taking a bit of a interesting route to get to Germany. Not entirely sure at the moment, but it does appear that at least for now, there's only one B-52 out there in the air, and we're still trying to see where it's going to be heading or landing.
Yeah, and also, by the way, we've gotten some more detail about the U.S. strikes inside of Iran. We are seeing here that apparently the U.S. is saying that they struck nearly 20 targets inside of Iran, so 20 different areas, and most of those targets were along the Iranian coast. We do know that they struck Avaz, which is generally, I think it's over closer toward Pakistan, I think, but it's one of the biggest oil fields inside of Iran to a large degree. They did hit that apparently, but they're saying 20 targets, so it does appear confirmed that the U.S. airstrikes are largely over with. Also, by the way, I'm mistaken. Avaz is not over there toward Pakistan. My bad with that. But apparently the strikes are over, and the U.S. is saying they struck 20 targets, and that's going to be generally it for the most part.
And so we will be waiting to see what other information we get out here in the near future, at least from the United States. It could be anything. So we'll have to eventually see. But moving us on out of that bit of news, I also see some people talking about the B-52s. And someone said the B-52 is obsolete because it's 70 years old. I hate to say this. I don't mean to sound like rude, but I guess you don't know a lot about how this thing works. It's a standoff delivery system. You don't need to have like a 3-year-old bomber to drop off a JASSM. It could be 70 years old. It could be 100 years old. It could still drop off a JASSM. That's why they're 70 years old and we haven't replaced them, is because it's a missile delivery system. That's also why the Russians use 80-year-old bombers as well to be able to drop off their calibers and other forms of cruise missiles against Ukraine, because there's no reason to upgrade them. There's no reason to make a new one. The old ones do the job all the same, so there's really no point in spending hundreds of billions of dollars replacing a bomber fleet with new bombers that are going to do the exact same thing as the old bomber. That's generally why they're still in service. But anyways, Moving us on out of that bit of news that's coming out of the United Kingdom or the general area, we've also been able to hear that within the state of Israel, the Houthis did fire their missile towards Eilat the other day. We actually covered this one on Sunday, and we finally got footage of the missile getting shot down on the 8th of June, which hopefully this video will play. And here we are. So here's the clip of the interception of the one Houthi missile that was fired towards Israel. And there's the interception.
Ooh, they
Yo.
really got them.
Man, that guy said, yo. I was like, honestly, man, I mean, I wouldn't disagree. Meanwhile, near Kiryat Shimona, there was a alert of rocket attacks earlier on in the day, several hours before we went on air. And we've additionally been able to see that the Israelis have conducted some airstrikes on Tyre, which we saw in this clip right here. This is near to the Tyre city area, not directly within the metropolitan area of Tyre. And we've also been able to get additional reports as well of strikes throughout the whole of southern Lebanon, with this footage coming out showing the Israeli Air Force's strikes within the area. And additionally, we also were able to see a picture of this as well. We also got a further report of the Israelis coming under attack within the region, including Hezbollah hitting fuel trucks, specifically the HEMTTs, manufactured by Oshkosh and used by the Israeli Defense Forces within the southern area, still showing that FPV drones are causing significant issues for Israeli logistics and forces within the area. We see here one of the HEMTTs, or the HEMTs, about to get hit by this Hezbollah FPV drone. And we see them apparently circling around for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe they're looking for another target to hit, which I think it kind of shows the stupidity of the Hezbollah drone operators. It's like you've got a giant logistics target right in front of you. Why in the world are you going to look for something else? But anyways, they finally did hit it right here and showed the slideshow of the drone getting closer to the target and then hitting it. But moving us on from that poorly edited clip, we also got to see another one showing that the FPV drones were also being used against the IDF's forces near to Beaufort Castle, which is a Crusades-era castle, or the ruins of a Crusades-era castle that exist here within southern Lebanon. And we also saw that Hezbollah forces were continuing strikes in this area against the IDF as well. Drone forces have started to show that they are a complete game changer in most wars, even conventional ones that are still being attempted to be fought by the United States and Israel. And for this reason, there's been a lot of demand, especially here on this channel and in a lot of the U.S. public, for the United States military to evolve rapidly, and for most Western militaries to evolve rapidly, to be able to deal with the new drone menace that exists on the battlefield. So far, we've seen that some steps and efforts have been made to try and innovate and bring in modern FPV drones into the modern armies here in the West, but we have seen that these efforts have been slow and largely mired with difficulty. We can actually see right here that this FPV drone appears to have hit near to the rear door of the Merkava Mark IV, and we can actually see that this Merkava Mark IV is a Merkava Mark IV-M, equipped with the Trophy Defense System. It appears that the Trophy Defense System did not work because it did not detect the drone as an incoming projectile to be able to fire off a charge at it and destroy it, and so the drone was actually able to impact onto the near rear track area of the tank. Depending on how the charge hit this area, the charge may have actually been able to penetrate the light armor near to the rear of the tank and gone into the crew compartment, which would most likely cause injuries and fatalities, along with a possible ammo detonation within the vehicle, although that would be highly unlikely. Or the warhead may have actually hit the rear fender of the Merkava, then sending the explosive charge into the trackage, or the track linkage, which may have led to a severance of the tracks, or it may have led to no damage at all. So this is kind of a little bit of an iffy hit right here that we're watching on film. We don't know if it knocked the tank out entirely, or if it just hit the track and either immobilized the vehicle for a short period of time or caused absolutely no damage. It's just really hard to say because of the impact point on this vehicle. But that's the end of that clip, but still showing us that Hezbollah is starting to use a far larger number of FPVs against all Israeli forces, whether they be logistics, motorized, mechanized, or armored. Moving us on out of southern Lebanon, and generally out of the Middle East for the moment, it is actually time for us, folks, to move on and into the rest of the news that we have for the night. We still have a lot of news to cover, folks, generally out of East Asia near to Taiwan, and also out of the war in Ukraine. Because the war in Ukraine, while it's not really getting a lot of headlines, at least on our title today, it has been absolutely huge what's been going on over the past 48 hours in that war. The Ukrainians have been laying down hell on the Russians, and we have the first confirmed mass retreat of Russian forces in the southern front due to a complete lack of supply. So we're
Man, I can't wait to get that Ukraine news tonight. Honestly, folks, like I was hoping to be able to headline the Ukraine news, but the Iran stuff, of course, was active. We had to cover that. It was obviously huge news right there. But the Ukraine news that came out yesterday, really over the last 48 hours, has been insane with the retreats and things like that. Like it's really wild. Stick around for that.
Yeah, it's been absolutely crazy. But before we get into that, I do have to say a humongous thanks to everybody who has been watching the show so far tonight. I've got to say that we're absolutely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many people have been here watching over the course of this night. We have had 22,000 people here at the peak, which is absolutely crazy. That's even larger than our breaking news stream that we ran, actually both of them on Sunday, which is absolutely unbelievable. And already 101,000 people have watched the stream in the first hour and 20 minutes alone. I've got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many people still continue to consider the channel to be their primary source of news. We try our best every single day, spending dozens of hours a week, more so like for me, like 70 hours a week, to make sure that we can put this news together and get it on air on these streams and cover everything in great detail. And I hope that we've been able to do an exceptional job tonight in covering the Middle East situation with great detail. And we do have to keep it in mind, folks, that we will be making sure to cover any new breaking news developments that come out within the region whenever we're able to get them during the show. So we might have to stop at least at some point here in the near future on eastern Ukraine or on the situation in East Asia to return back to the Middle East and cover the developments that are going on within that area. But before we get to that, I do have to say that we are going to take a moment to get to a couple of questions, 3 of them from the chat, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
Also, by the way, if you are new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, by the way. We are only about 180 subscribers away from hitting a channel milestone of 600,000 subscribers, by the way. So a huge shout out to everybody for subscribing. We've gained a lot of new people tonight, by the way, and we're glad to have you. But jumping into our first of 3 super chats, we'll get right back into our very, very wild Ukraine and Russian news this evening. We do have a $100 support from none other than Bobby, also known as LC39A. And a huge shout out to you, Bobby, for throwing in that support right there. We do appreciate that very much. And he said, I'm here.
Hey, and a wonderful thing to know that you're here, Bobby. And I got to say, humongous thanks to you for that incredible support and being here with us tonight. And I also got to say thank you so much for massively supporting the channel. Support like yours helps us to be able to keep this channel running day in and day out. And I've got to say that it's a wonderful and absolutely amazing thing to see that folks like you stick around here with this channel and enjoy it enough to support it. To make it known for folks who might be new here to the channel, super chatters are the folks who keep this channel running. We do not have any ads or sponsors that run on these streams, meaning that when we run these shows every single day, we do not make a single dime or a dollar off of these live streams from ads or sponsors. It is the viewers themselves, the folks like you who are watching right now, that support this channel and help us to be able to make this kind of news possible through y'all's crowdfunding. Nobody has to support the channel, but the folks who go out of their way to support it make this entire thing a reality for the millions of people who watch the Enforcer channel every single month. And I gotta say a humongous thanks to you, Bobby, for that incredible support and being here with us tonight and supporting the channel, and everybody else who's been here over the course of years, supporting this channel and enjoying it, and helping this thing to be possible not only for us to run, but for millions to watch and enjoy every single month. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than Truck and Shelf, who put in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Truck and Shelf, for that 50.
Hey!
And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Truck and Shelf said, good evening, Enforcers. I am absolutely enthralled about the entire situation, and I am not even sure what to say. The Red Sea blocked, the Strait blocked, really. And this will mess up the entire global economy and say to the House, Senate, and people that we have to go in.
And I'd have to say a huge thanks to you for support, Truck and Chev, and I would generally agree that it's necessary at this point that we continue the war to a successful conclusion, because this isn't really a war that we can just pack up and walk away from. We're in a very bad position right now strategically, and if we pack up and walk away, that incredibly bad, absolute defeat sort of a situation that we're in right now becomes solidified in stone, and that becomes the situation in the Middle East for the rest of history for the most part, which is something that we generally cannot afford in the United States of America if we want to remain the dominant global superpower. We will start to lose a significant amount of pull and also abilities within the within the entirety of the globe if we lose our sphere of influence inside the Middle East. The thing is, however, is that everyone has to understand that the Congress does have a reason for generally their hesitancy, and that's that they're not being informed. A democracy, or a federal republic, which is what the United States is specifically, which is a form of democracy, largely requires on the free flow of information from multiple branches, from the executive to the Congress, for them to be able to know exactly what they're going to be doing, what they're doing right now, and what the plans in future is together. The United States requires cooperation to be able to function properly. And right now, there isn't really a lot of cooperation on the part of the executive branch with any other branch of government to be able to see that any of their strategic objectives or aims are understood and then supported by the general Congress. And I would say that that's the problem right now. If the executive branch would actually spend the time to treat other people in this country, especially the elected representatives of all of the people watching this channel right now, as equals, and actually apprise them, brief them, and inform them on the current situation and why they believe that a course of action of continued conflict would be prudent to see a successful conclusion of the war, we would probably see that a lot of them would change their minds, because they wouldn't want to sit there and say that they voted to limit the actions of the president and then lead to a U.S. defeat, because they would now be fully apprised and understanding the situation that's involved. On the other hand, however, we do have to understand, folks, there's a lot of politics in play in the situation on a mechanical level, so let me explain why there would be hesitancy. If they approve a continuation of the conflict, not really knowing anything about it in detail, and it ends up in a defeat, a blistering defeat for the United States somehow, that ends up becoming very scarring to their political careers. And regardless of how much political polarization exists in this country, they could be voted out of their seats in the Senate or the House if they vote to continue the war and they have absolutely no idea how it's going. If they vote to end the war or to limit the actions of the president and largely announce a withdrawal of U.S. forces from the region, if it goes badly from there, at least they could argue from their political stance, well, the president didn't really inform us anything about what was going on, so we really didn't know if that was a good decision or not. And generally, we can't really take the president's word at face value, so really the blame's all on him, and they get to shift the blame to the executive branch. If they approve the war and it goes badly from here and they have absolutely no idea how it's going, the entire blame lands on them, and that's why right now there's a huge issue in the Senate about whether they can continue the war or not, or whether they'd vote to, because they don't know if that's going to be basically ending their political careers if they voted for that with the little information that they have. So that's why we're seeing that there's that issue right now within the Congress, and that's why cooperation and communication amongst the governmental branches is important. Not only that, it's the Congress. The Congress is the elected representation and the will of the people personified in our elected representatives. It's not the office of the president. The office of the president is there, and the executive branch is there to follow through on the laws and acts of the Union which are passed in Congress. The executive branch really isn't there to be the single arbiter of justice, the law, and everything else in the country. So it's important for there to be some joint communications, especially on the part of the executive to the Congress, about what's going on and what their vision is and where they think this should be going. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and a humongous thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Truck and Chef. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running and make this thing possible, and also we wouldn't be able to talk about important things like making sure that the government continues to cooperate with each other, and we don't see that one branch attempts to run the country as a singular presidential republic, or what I would generally start to describe or say is akin to an attempted dictatorship, by leaving so many elements of the government in the dark to where they don't really know what's going on and they really can't conduct their jobs properly. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And I see some people saying in the chat really quickly before we move on that they don't like the Congress and whatnot. Here's the problem, folks. If you're an American, you believe in the Constitution and you're supposed to support the Constitution. The Constitution is what made the United States into what it is today. There is really no ifs, ands, or buts about joint communication or cooperation between the branches. That is supposed to be expected as a part of our functioning democracy and our functioning federal republic. If you don't like a senator or a representative, that's your problem, and that's the problem. Well, that's not actually more so, not really y'all's problem. That's more so the problem of the constituents that voted in that person. You only have the control over the one representative and the one senator that you cast your vote for in the Congress. However the Congress is structured, whether you like most of the representatives in there or not, that is the elected body and representative of the U.S. public, and they have a constitutional authority to be notified and apprised of the developments of the United States, so that way they can vote properly as the will of the Republic on what the United States is going to be doing next. There isn't really a question to that, and I would generally say that if you do not understand that concept, you hardly even understand what it is to be an American. That is one of the key cornerstone elements of this U.S. federal republic that was founded by our founding fathers 250 years ago, and we have stuck to this day, meaning that is a cornerstone part of how this government and country operates. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, so this one goes to none other than Rick Galenchin, and Rick is all the way from Canada.
Hey!
And thank you very much, good sir Rick, for that 70 Canadian support right there. He threw in a super sticker, actually 2 of them. The YouTube creature saying you're amazing, and we do appreciate it very much, Rick. And we love our Canadian viewers. We love the viewers from literally everywhere, and not because we have to, but because we do. We love the Quokkas down in Australia. We love the Canadians with their ice cream shops. We love the British with their fish and chips and stuff. We love it all. We love it all. But Enforcer, what say you?
We love the Canadians for the British Columbian Mountains, for the Mounties, for the beavers that they have, which are their national animal, for the maple leaf, for maple syrup. We love the Canadians for a lot of things. The Canadians are a brotherly nation, not to use a Russian term there, but I would say that if any country is a brother or sister nation in the United States, it is Canada. They're very similar in their culture, their dialect, and many other things that make us common brothers and common friends in the modern day in this global world that we live in now. And I got to say that folks like you, Rick Galitchin, who support this channel and help us to keep this thing running, help us to ensure that we can continue to be a voice on YouTube in support of American and Western interest, including yours, around the globe. And I got to thank you so much for that incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, with your support, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, keep it rolling, and keep speaking in support of American and Western interest around the entirety of the globe and the struggles in which our sphere finds itself in every single day to continue to remain on top against the axis of evil, which we have to face down every day. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on from the Middle East and on into East Asia very briefly for a quick update on the situation in East Asia before we move on to our massive line share of news which came out of Ukraine over the course of the day. Moving us on and into the area of East Asia, we have been able to hear that the Taiwanese Coast Guard Administration has stated that 5 Chinese government vessels, including Haichun 6, 8, 9, and Donghai Jui 113 and China Coast Guard 2202, have operated east of Taiwan and broadcast inquiries about port entry to 3 passing merchant cargo ships while falsely asserting jurisdiction. According to Taiwan's China Coast Guard, Haichun 6 queried a Singapore-flagged vessel near Lumbai on June 7th, a Liberian-flagged vessel east of Suo on June 9th, and a Benin-flagged vessel east of Senjiao later the same morning. Taiwanese Coast Guard vessels warned the Chinese ships that they had no jurisdiction in Taiwan's exclusive economic zone and told the merchant vessels to maintain normal navigation and ignore the Chinese broadcasts. That was according to Joseph Wu, the Secretary General of Taiwan's National Security Council.
Did they shout at them?
China Coast Guard, this is Taiwan water. You don't belong. You go, man. Like, honestly, I don't know. Like, they might have.
Yeah, man, I wish we had that video available. Do we have it super available? Like, I would love to see that video again. I love the zeal the Taiwanese have about telling the Chinese ships to get the. Oh, we have it. Let's hear it.
Listen up, China Coast Guard 3501. Listen up, China Coast Guard 3501. This is Taiwan's water. This is not your water. You don't belong here. Turn around and leave now. China Coast Guard 3501. Listen up.
I love it, man. I could hear that all day. If you put that on a loop, I could listen to that all day long. I just love it. It's like music in my ears. China Coast Guard, you'll go!
Honestly, that was a good one, but one that we never showed on air, folks, because it was just a radio broadcast, was a showdown between a Taiwanese Mirage and a Chinese J-11. Have you heard that one before?
I think I might have probably.
Like, it's like where it was the ROC pilot. He was saying, shame on you, you disgraceful little worm, fighting and supporting a dictatorship. How do you like Xi Jinping's boot? How does it taste? And like the Chinese pilot was running, F you, man, kiss my ass. And like the Taiwanese pilot was saying, look at you, you're angry because you don't have any counter to that. That's true. And they were like going off on each other up on the air. It was a funny thing. I wish we could show that to y'all.
I like the one where I think it was I don't know if it was a U.S. warplane or like a ship going by or something like that, and the Chinese were like, "You'll go, you'll leave," and the U.S. was like, "Meow." So they were meowing over the radio.
No, that was the Chinese. That was the Chinese who did that. They were like, "This is Chinese Shah of God, you go!" And then like U.S. pilot said, "I'm operating in international airspace in accordance with international law," and then the Chinese went, "Meow," and just like left the radio call with that. It was very weird.
Yeah, it was weird. I thought it was the U.S. doing it the whole time. So apparently it was the Chinese doing it. I guess they had that cat in them or something.
But Taiwan did shout in another way today, not with words, but with arms, as we did get to see that Taiwan's 5th Theater Command conducted a live-fire heavy artillery drill near to the Daija River estuary in Taichung, which is generally down in the southeastern area of the country. Actually, it's in the central western area of the country, near to the Strait of Taiwan. The integrating the 58th Artillery Command, the 234th Combined Arms Brigade, and the 586th Combined Arms Brigade. The exercise simulated a PLA amphibious landing attempt in central Taiwan, with Republic of China Army units conducting layered fires against enemy forces approaching Baishatun and Jian beaches. Systems used included the Thunderbolt 2000 MLRS provided by the Republic of Korea, the M109A2 and M11A2 self-propelled howitzers provided and sold by the United States of America, including the 120mm mortars, 155mm howitzers, most likely of the M777 variety, and TOW-2A and TOW-2B anti-tank guided missiles, which are also provided by the United States. Notably, the Thunderbolt 2000 conducted live fire operations within an operational area for the first time in 7 years, which this is actually a picture of one of those Thunderbolt 2000s conducting an MLRS barrage on a simulated target. We can also see a picture here of some M109A2s firing off their shells as well, and crazy enough in this picture, you can actually see that they caught some of the shells actually launched out of the barrel in the still of the image. You can actually see 4 of them here, which is a pretty unique sort of a thing. In this third picture, we can also see the simulated fire drills by the TOW-2A and TOW-2B anti-tank guided missile units as well, which are for anti-tank defense. And we also got to see in this fourth picture here, the simulated targets getting hit downrange near to the area of the beaches just outside of Taichung. So it does appear that the Taiwanese are conducting live fire drills as a response to the Chinese aggressions and low-level coercion efforts that are now being attempted around Taiwanese waters to once again show that their armed forces are at a state of combat readiness and are willing and capable of repelling a possible Chinese assault or attempted amphibious landing on the island of Taiwan, which is largely a last case resort for the Taiwanese. The Taiwanese are largely going to be attempting to defeat the Republic of China, well, actually the People's Republic of China, in the air and on the seas surrounding the island before they ever even attempt to make a landing. Moving us on out of Taiwan and East Asia in general, it's now time for us to get on into what is going to be one of the largest news segments that we have covered on Ukraine in a hot minute. Over the past 2 days, which we have not really been able to cover, we haven't even been able to cover up until right now today, the Ukrainians have been going off. There's no other way to describe it than that. They have been hitting targets of an unbelievable variety, and we've also seen that their accumulated damage from their attacks on the southern front in Ukraine have also caused an irreparable situation for the Russian armed forces, and they are now conducting a retreat out of the area. Before we even get into anything else, we are going to focus solely on the southern front today, because the situation now appears to already be entering a critical phase. And we can't say that the analysis here is inaccurate, because this was an analyzed dead on the nail back a couple of days ago. It was about a week ago at this point, as to who was going to be retreating first, and it was dead on the money. Many of y'all will know, just to recap the supply situation within this area, that the Russian Federation supply apparatus or supply chains and the rear lines for the civilians and the military have completely collapsed through the occupied areas of the Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimean oblasts. As a result of this, a large amount of fuel is now unavailable within the area. Fuel sales have been completely halted in Crimea, and we're now seeing that the fuel situation is now reaching into the rest of the area, which is leading to a complete supply collapse, which is now leading to a domino effect where other supply lines are also collapsing because they cannot operate. This includes ammunition, supplies, fuel, clothes, and everything else. This has led to a situation that we believed would be leading either to Russian retreats or a complete Russian front collapse in the next several months, most likely by the fall. We are seeing that a frontline collapse has already happened today at the most farthest periphery of Kherson, which many of y'all will have heard on the show, would be one of the first places to fall because it is quite truly the farthest away from any beginning or opening of a supply line that would enter the southern front, meaning that this one area here called the Kinburn Spit is the farthest away from the active supply lines, meaning that any sort of supply line deficiencies would start to hit these areas furthest west first, which would also give us an idea of the pulse of the supply condition for the rest of the region immediately before we get any other indicators. Over the course of the past 48 hours, we have been able to confirm the following information from Atesh, which is a Ukrainian partisan group, which has been able to report this information to us from the rear line area, and we've also been able to confirm through other sources as well. And here is what Atesh has stated. Russian armed forces are leaving the Kinburn Spit in the Mykolaiv Oblast. An Atesh agent from the headquarters of the Dnieper Group of Forces reports that the SDU's actions to cut supply routes have forced the occupiers to hastily evacuate the Kinburn Spit. Units of the 337th Regiment are abandoning their positions as supply have been completely disrupted and the delivery of ammunition, fuel, and food has completely ceased to this area. Due to significant personnel losses, units of the 337th Regiment are being withdrawn from the shoreline from the northern and western parts of the Spit. Fire teams are unable to cope with the downing of SDU UAVs and losses continue to mount. After some troops were redeployed to the Zaporizhia sector, the remaining units are virtually depleted. Replenishment has not been carried out even once. Command is withdrawing personnel from some positions and redeploying them to others. Only remnants of units, no longer capable of holding the defense, remain on the Spit. The occupiers' logistics systems in the area have completely collapsed. And then they stated at the end, if they've served in the Russian forces and see positions being evacuated, report the information to the Atesh, considering that they might be hopefully able to get some more rats to give them farther information about the situation. This is generally what we're seeing right now within the Kinburn Spit as the current force disposition within the area. Each one of these little icons, the diamond-shaped icons with the X mark through them, is what would be generally a motorized regiment of the Russian armed forces. As many of y'all will know, there is only one motorized rifle regiment near to the area of the Kinburn Spit, and Kinburn Spit, as far as the current force disposition, has largely been completely abandoned, save for maybe a few company-sized elements that are now still holding the area. The reason why they're doing this is because it's near impossible to be able to supply Russian forces on the Kinburn Spit due to Ukrainian drone attacks and also the major supply line damage that's been caused front-wide within this area, which has led to the position becoming what is called strategically untenable. A strategically untenable position has to meet one of the following requirements. Either they are taking such heavy losses that it no longer makes sense to hold the position is so exposed to enemy forces that they are not able to hold it without a threat of encirclement, or they are not able to be supplied properly and the army will starve or die if they remain in position, meaning that a retreat or a withdrawal is necessary for the remnants of the force that will survive to be able to stay intact and fight another day. And apparently from what we're seeing now, the 337th Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces has now deemed the position to be a strategically untenable position due to the supply line situation, and that they have largely conducted a complete withdrawal from the Spit. This isn't that big. The Ukrainians really don't have a way, it is quite big, but it isn't going to be big as far as frontline changes. The Ukrainians really don't have a way to land on the Kinburn Spit and support a larger attacking force breaking through in this area and then advancing into the largely undefended Russian rear lines. That would largely be something of fiction, but it is showing us something important. The Russians are running out of supplies, and this is one of the first physical examples that we have of a unit conducting a retreat or a withdrawal from a whole front area because they're trying to get to an area where there are supplies that they can at least eat off of and survive instead of dying where they were in their current positions. This is also giving us an understanding that this will start to affect the other areas of the front in the Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Crimea regions here within the near future. If that unit has already run out of food, ammunition, and other supplies, it is going to be not before long that other units in the Kherson region definitively run out of ammunition and supplies. The Zaporizhia region will also follow suit probably a little bit later on, but Crimea is also in a very dangerous and jeopardizing position, much like the Kherson Oblast. These two are absolutely supply critical at this point, and if they do not get supplies anytime here within the near future, which does not appear to be likely, we will most likely see that there is a complete Russian frontline collapse in this area, either
Oh, bless you.
Thank you. Either by a complete withdrawal of the Russian forces from this area as they try and make it to an area where they can at least find food or ammunition, or we will see that these units are completely destroyed in a breakthrough, one or the other. They might not even be able to retreat at this point, unless they conduct a foot retreat out of the area to be able to even get to an area that's slightly serviceable via somewhat operational supply lines, most likely east of Melitopol. But right now, a lot of people are talking about this situation and the retreat of the 337th Regiment of the Russian Army from the Kimburn Spit. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this right now, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so this is a big deal. It's not like a monumental amount of troops that have been retreating, but it's a big deal because this is one of the first times that we've seen an operational retreat from any area on the front lines as of recent. This is one of the biggest ones we've seen in pretty much ages at this point, so that's why it's a big deal. So now that we're seeing this, that these Russian troops are retreating away from the Mykolaiv area and retreating toward Crimea in a pretty large retreat, actually. What do you think about that? 42% said this will become full scale very soon for the Russian forces in the entire area, while 26% said it's simply only a limited retreat, and 25% said it seems like a bad sign, but really can't tell much beyond that. And I am definitely with the 42%. This is a sign of things to come without a doubt. The fact that the Russians are doing this in the Kinburn Spit at all is a very bad sign. Of course, we know the reason why it's happening is because of the logistics completely collapsing through the Ukrainian occupied territories. So that's why it's taking place. So there's no reason whatsoever that if these troops are retreating, that means the other ones should retreat because they're not getting forces or supplies either for the most part. So I'm with the 42%. It will become full scale soon. And also, not only that, but Crimea is getting cut off further and further and further throughout the days. We also saw this morning, that we'll get into in just a second, that a major bridge connecting the Ukrainian occupied territory with Crimea was blown up completely. And that was a major Russian supply route for them to get supplies down to Crimea and also up from Crimea into occupied Ukrainian territory. So also another huge loss that we'll get into here very shortly. But Enforcer, what say you?
So to give you all a little bit of a hypothetical scenario here, I'm actually going to copy this map really quickly so that way I can show you all this without affecting the real NATO disposition map. Let me give you all the hypothetical scenario that we're looking at in the Kherson area in an illustrated form to be able to show this a little bit more effectively, what a supply loss can lead to for a larger armed force. So we're going to take the Russian elements in the Kaliningrad Oblast as a hypothetical example and use the Lithuanian army as our stand-in Ukrainian force for this hypothetical scenario. So let us say that the battle group Gusov moves on into the area of Kabardai, and this is the defensive line that they're holding. So we're going to move all of them out here. We're going to move every single motorized rifle regiment directly onto the front, and we're going to keep the separate tank regiment in the rear somewhere around Gusev itself. And then we're going to take the Lithuanian Iron Wolf Brigade, the Lithuanian Ostuzhanka Brigade, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and also the Lithuanian Zimitaish Brigade, and we're also going to move those into the area as well. Also, additionally, with another Lithuanian National Defense Volunteer Brigade as well. But these are all comparably sized forces. Regiments and brigades are operationally not that much different in size, but brigades are a little bit larger. So this is how an average part of the Ukrainian front line is going to be looking in the present day in a very simplified form. You're going to have the Russian infantry regiments or the motorized regiments on one side, and you're going to have a mix of Ukrainian mechanized and motorized units on the other side, with some rare armored elements mixed in here and there. With the Ukrainians, it's still in a supply side positive situation to where they have enough supplies and ammunition to be able to keep the morale up, keep their soldiers fed, and keep their vehicles armed and running. They are in a much more advantageous position compared to the Russians, especially in firepower and maneuverability, which are going to be the most important elements that we would actually see on a battlefield. If the Ukrainian forces use one of their motorized brigades to engage a Russian motorized regiment on a flank and fix them in position, which is what happens once a unit comes under fire. That means that a mechanized unit, like, say, the Iron Wolf, which we're going to use as our Ukrainian stand-in, is able to actually maneuver around this regiment. Now, at this point in time, in a normal battle, once we've seen that a flank has been broken, those reserve units, which are usually of higher quality, like this tank regiment, would usually be able to go up and fix into position this mechanized brigade. That means that this mechanized brigade did make a limited advance, but it has now been stopped and countered by a stronger unit, an armored brigade, that is now able to stop its breakthrough and also fix it in position as well, meaning that the Ukrainians would largely be caught in a battle to where either they're able to overwhelm the Russians by superior firepower, which in this position or this condition they would be able to, because the Russians are going to run out of ammunition before the Ukrainians ever do, or the Ukrainians would have to find another unit to be able to outmaneuver the Russians. And in that situation, they could take another mechanized brigade, move it around the flank, and move this motorized brigade to hold off the other two brigades. The other two brigades are no longer in a condition to be able to even conduct an offensive, considering that this front is weak. They don't have the ability to maneuver because they don't have any fuel to move on with their transport trucks, and they also don't have the ammunition to conduct an offensive either, meaning they're stuck entirely on the defensive. This second mechanized brigade is now able to move around, encircle this tank regiment, and completely destroy it, removing it from the scenario. That means that the Ukrainians have now conducted, in this sense, what would be a absolute breakthrough, and are now entrapping the Russian regiments on the front in position. The Russians do not have the fuel to be able to outmaneuver the envelopment, and they also do not have the firepower to even handle a long-term defensive, meaning that they have two scenarios. They can either face absolute destruction in the face of superior Ukrainian firepower in that scenario, or they can surrender. Whichever option they take, these regiments are completely out of the fight at this point, and these Ukrainian mechanized brigades are able to start advancing largely through unopposed territory, deeper into supply nodes and other critical functions in the rear line area, which could completely immobilize and absolutely destroy this entire Russian front if that became a reality. And with the current supply situation right now in Zaporizhia, especially, that could start to happen. No matter how many Russian regiments there are on the front, if they cannot maneuver and they cannot fire because they're out of fuel and ammunition, they're generally out of the fight, and the Ukrainians will be able to break through, envelop, and also push about as far as they want to if the situation became absolutely desperate. And seeing that the Russians are not fixing the supply situation in this area, the supply situation will become desperate. It already is in a very endangered, or I guess you could say perilous sort of a scenario, and considering that it's not being fixed and there is no way to fix it, they will enter an inevitable scenario where there could be a frontline collapse of that type. I hope that kind of illustrated all of y'all using the NATO map, which we hardly ever get to use, how that would actually unfold in actual combat, and how that sort of a flank breakthrough and then envelopment would occur, which would definitely be possible considering that the enemy forces, the Russians, are now completely lost in terms of supplies. But moving us on out of that, in the Kherson, in the Kinburn Spit area of the Oblast of Kherson, we have also been able to hear that the Ukrainians have largely almost completely isolated Crimea today, effectively, from their supply lines via the land bridge, the very little supplies that were coming in. The Ukrainians have destroyed and knocked out the Chonhar Bridge. This little picture here is one of the few that we have of the damage to the bridge, but the Russian authorities, the occupational authorities, announced earlier today that they had completely closed the Chonhar Bridge due to the major damage that it had suffered from Ukrainian attacks. That is the only bridge into Crimea from the E-105 highway to Melitopol that the Russians have been able to ferry supplies into Crimea with, meaning that right now the Russian Federation only has one other usable supply route, which is the Kerch Strait, generally by ferry or by bridge. That's the only one they have left. If they want to get any supplies into Crimea, they're going to have to either drive the trucks over the Kerch Bridge, or they're going to have to run a train over the railroad bridge in the Kerch Strait, or they're going to have to use the very limited availability they have by the few ferries they have left to be able to move trucks or rail cars across the strait into Crimea to get any kind of supplies in. And so far we've seen that the Russians haven't conducted that sort of an action. That also means that the Crimean Peninsula is also in a very perilous, it might actually be in a perilous position right now, as opposed to the Kherson's dangerous position that they're in, and we might see that there is an absolute supply collapse and a complete collapse of any sort of governmental or occupational order by the Russian Federation within the Crimean Oblast due to the significant supply constraints that we're seeing right now because of the closure, or largely the complete isolation of the Crimean Peninsula from any other operational supply routes. We've also been able to see that within Simferopol, it appears that the Ukrainians Ukrainians, well, not the Ukrainians, but the Russians inside of the Crimean Oblast are continuing to try and bootleg fuel and sell entire cans of gasoline out of the trunks of their cars. This is how bad the supply line situation is getting, that we're seeing a black market appear for available gasoline wherever people can find it right now.
Are you sure? I thought these were alleged to be the Russian troops trying to put them in the back of civilian vehicles so they could try to sneak it through, so that way Ukraine wouldn't hit it. Because generally speaking, Ukraine doesn't really hit civilian-looking vehicles. They try to just hit the ones that look like they're carrying commercial fuel, like for the Russian forces. So I thought that's what they were doing.
Actually, yeah, you are right. I misread the title there. It actually is Russian forces loading up the fuel into the boots of these cars, or the trunks, as we call them here in America, to be able to try and avoid the Ukrainians hitting them. So a correction on that, folks. I actually just got the caption on that one incorrect.
Yeah, I think that's what they're up to right there. I'm not sure if it's working or not, but I think the Ukrainians are going to pick up on this, and I would imagine. Also, by the way, I think the Russians even stopped civilian traffic down the highway in occupied Ukrainian territory. I think they stopped it the last I heard, so I'm not sure how this is going to work.
They suspended all transport or traffic that was civilian in nature on the highway. So really, if any civilian vehicles are on the highway, the Ukrainians can assume by that announcement that they are military vehicles and strike them with really no regard or additional research on whether it is a civilian or military vehicle, because it'll be assumed military if it's moving down the highway.
Also, what are the odds that those containers are not rated for gasoline?
Pretty high.
Yeah, they'll probably have it all in the trunk of the car and it'll probably catch on fire.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see a video like that coming out here in the future. I have a feeling we might, but it is showing us that the Russians are getting absolutely desperate at this point. In the meantime, we also get to see, speaking of some Black Sea news, that the Ukrainians did shoot down a Shahed near to the coastline of Odessa. We saw that in this clip right here. And there it goes down into the water, breaking up on impact. And moving on from that clip, we also get to see as well another clip that showed us the Ukrainians actually striking an unknown Russian warship near to the Kerch Strait area. We don't know what vessel this was even, but it was a Russian patrol vessel that was hit heavily by Ukrainian drones and completely destroyed. When you see the first drone coming in and hitting the patrol boat. And then we can see another clip here showing us the remains of the patrol boat, the superstructure and bow that is now literally erupting with flames. It appears that there's now fire leaking out of the side plating of the hull, so it's showing us that even the inner depths of the hull are on fire, and then we got to see the second drone impacted there. Moving us on from these clips, we also were able to see, speaking of larger Ukrainian attacks within the areas of the Russian Federation, that the Ukrainians did conduct another attack on Grushevaya Balka within Novorossiysk, with the fire once again being seen visible over the mountainsides, segregating Novorossiysk from Grushevaya Balka. This doesn't appear to be as large a fire as the last one, but it does show us that they are still hitting oil tanks and facilities throughout the area of Novorossiysk and the oil port. We've also been able to see that within the city of Krasnodar, there are now fuel shortages showing up within this area as well, which we're able to see in this clip. We can see here that there is literally no fuel available except for diesel, which appears to be the last type available. All civilian fuels of grades 92, 95, and 100 octane are now not even sellable, as the physical supply has completely deteriorated and ceased to exist.
Must suck to be them, I gotta say. That's gotta suck right there. Also, by the way, I don't know if you've heard it or not, but there's like F-35s racing around outside. Like right now, I'm not sure what's going on outside. There's like a whole bunch of F-35s that was racing around. They might be gone now, but I'm seeing pictures and videos coming out on Twitter of the Salt Lake City area apparently being buzzed by fighter jets all over the place.
Man, I was hearing them while I was prepping for the show, and I was getting so annoyed with it. Honestly, I was like, damn, like it was so loud, folks. It was literally shaking the windows in my place. I was like, damn, could they like do this at another time, like like before the show? Like I was like, could they do it before I'm having to do my show prep? Because they were doing it the whole time. You would just hear this loud, like thunderous roar overhead, and the windows and the walls would be shaking. I mean, they were insanely loud. Actually, can we? Oh, well, we probably can't show those clips.
No, we do. Yeah, we definitely can't. I think there was also pictures of like a weather balloon or something like that floating around like near the jets. I'm not sure if it was just it was probably just an exercise. Although I will admit they were pretty loud, like unusually loud today. So I'm not sure if they were going around trying to check out the weather balloon that was floating around or whatever that balloon was that was out there or what they were doing.
It's pretty interesting. In the meantime, we also got to see this fire that was caused in Krasnodar in apparently one of the houses hit by friendly fire, air defense. Moving us on from that clip, we also were able to see additionally that there was a unfortunate incident that occurred within the Dagestan Oblast, where it appears that a fuel pipeline has unfortunately suffered a spontaneous combustion. We saw this right here.
That is unfortunate right there. It looks like Dagestan has turned into hell.
Well, at least they got a cloud overhead. There's a silver lining to every cloud, as they say. We also got another look at this.
I wonder if the G-Wagon gang knows how to put a fire out.
You know, I'm not thinking so, because this was the beginning of the fire right here. This was like right after the strike, and this also shows when the fire blossomed into its mature adult form. Here's the clip. Watch it blossom.
Oh!
I don't think they can control that. I think that's just beyond any firefighting capabilities, really.
Also, by the way, for everybody asking, by the way, this was not a Ukrainian attack that caused this, according to what we know. This was simply, they're alleging it was bad maintenance on the gas line. That's what they were alleging caused the situation right here, which is possible, by the way. It is Dagestan. But it was not an attack, from what we can gather.
I actually heard, folks, that we were able to reach out to the Dagestani construction crew that built this pipeline a couple of years ago, and we were actually able to see some of the materials that they used to construct the pipeline. Apparently, they used some form of office paper to be able to build the pipeline out of, which generally they said at the time might have a somewhat longer survival period, but it appears that unfortunately their calculations were incorrect, and it appears that office paper is not really usable to construct and operate a pipeline out of. So that appears to be the reason why we saw this unbelievable conflagration within the area of the Dagestan Oblast over the course of the day. But let's watch the rest of the clips that we have, because this was filmed quite a lot from the Dagestanis. Moving us on from that clip, which sounded like rocket launching, we also got to see another clip showing us the fire.
That's bad. That's kind of near some houses a little bit. Careful going outside, kids. It's hot.
Speaking of something hot, we got another development fresh off of the presses, hot off the presses, actually. The ink is still warm, on the situation with this pipeline. Upon further investigation of the Dagestani construction group, which did build this pipeline, we have also been able to find out that the foreman apparently liked to smoke, but he didn't just smoke those normal tobacco cigarettes. This is apparently the instrument that they found within his office, apparently showing us once again that generally, from what we can tell, the Dagestani construction crews were a little bit underpowered in the mental facilities and also underpowered in construction equipment as well. But we actually have some new footage coming out of some of the flamingo strikes that have been conducted against the Russian Federation. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we have a video coming out right now. Sadly, I don't have a geolocation on it right this second, but it looks like Ukraine's firing flamingos into Russia. It looks like we have a video. I believe this is a flamingo, it looks like. Let's take a look at it and see if it is.
Yeah, it looks like one to me. It's got the overhead air intake for the jet engine. It's stubby. Well, it's large, but also has stubby wings. Definitely an FP5 Flamingo.
Yeah, it looks like it. Also, by the way, this is an ongoing attack that Ukraine's conducting on Russia apparently right now. We did see that Cheboksary, which apparently is home to some of the Russian military manufacturers, apparently was hit as well just about 30 minutes ago. I'm not sure if they were hit with the Flamingo, but they got hit by some Ukrainian munition, and we saw a bunch of smoke coming up from it. So there's an ongoing attack, and the fact that flamingos are flying indicates that some target of note or of value is probably about to get smacked.
Cheboksary is one hell of a city. You can tell by the backrooms looking liminal space that this neighborhood exists in at the bottom of this image. We'll get to that one here in a little bit, folks, because we have a lot to cover as far as the strikes are going right now. Moving us on into our last clip from the Dagestani oil pipeline explosion. This is another clip that we had. This one's one of the closest of the fire. They're burning
Look at
rubber.
this crazy, bro. Look at this crazy, bro. He's sitting there like going to burn his clutch ice, and they're like revving it up. This dude doesn't even know how to drive.
Man, I can tell you, man, that with that kind of a facial expression, there are two neurons up there, and they're just bouncing around. Every once in a while, they click. They give them an idea. I heard that if you knock on this guy's head, it's hollow.
Damn.
I'm just saying.
Brutal on this dude.
I'm just saying, this guy is really handling the situation quite poorly. But moving us on out of that whole deal, we also were able to see that within the area of Novokubashevsk, there was also a significant hit on the oil refinery within this area, once again knocking out the refinery. We've also been able to hear further on than that within the area of St. Petersburg, there's also been an attack on an arsenal within the area. We understand this is the arsenal factory within St. Petersburg, and this clip here shows one of the fires after the strikes.
Ох.
The fire brigade is responding.
Это уже, наверное, 8-й.
That's serious right there. Holy moly! Wait a second here. I just got a video of that flamingo that we just saw in the last clip right now. It just flew right past somebody's window in their apartment. Like, look at this. This is crazy.
That's 100% a flamingo.
Bruh.
I'm not gonna lie, man. That thing kind of looks
God.
casual flying through. It looks like it's just like a little private jet flying into an airport.
Man, that is serious though, man. You look out a window and you see like basically like the equivalent of a tomahawk just like scooting, like casually sliding by. It's like, no wonder they walk back into the center of the building.
Man, that thing sounds like a little private jet, honestly. That's ridiculous. Like, I've never heard of one of those things in flight. Like, they've never filmed one in broad daylight. That is actually hilarious looking. Like, how big this thing is and how slow it's moving. Man, that thing is honestly like a flying tank, basically.
Yeah, honestly, man, that's like a very deceivingly strong thing. Like it's sliding through, like it's just kind of like like a minivan or something. But that thing's serious. That thing's like very serious with the warhead that thing carries on it.
Man, I wish I could find like that meme club music like they use like when anyone's sliding through. Like it goes ben 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 ben. Like, bro, that's how it's like moving on through. It's like just real casual, like on its way to the liquor store. It's unreal. Look at it, bro. That's insane.
Comical the way that thing's just like you can tell it's heavy too, like by the way that thing's like making that noise and also kind of like slowly like falling through the air almost. Like that thing's heavy.
That's unreal, honestly. I can't believe we got a clip that clear of this thing. That is insane. If you get any more clips, make sure to let us know because they are going to be great if we can get them. But we also got to see in the St. Petersburg area that the 15th Naval Arsenal is still burning and a thick cloud of white smoke is coming from the arsenal, which is showing us that there's been a major loss of munitions at the 15th Naval Arsenal. And it's unbelievable the amount of munitions that must be on fire to create this endless billow of white smoke. It's quite literally a cloud like you would see in the normal sky, but an unbelievably large one that's starting from the ground and rising into the air above. But that's the end of that clip, showing us what the 15th Naval Arsenal looks like. In the meantime, not to bring back an old cult classic, but it appears that the IRA from Ireland is back, but in Ukrainian form. Today we have heard that apparently a load of cars have exploded because they have had bombs apparently mounted onto them, and there has been an endless amount of footage today. There's been about 4 different cars that have exploded in Moscow over just today, and one of them appears to have actually been a high priority target, which we'll be getting on into very soon. But before we get on into that, we do have a lot of people right now talking about the current poll that we have up right now on the Chunhard Bridge being destroyed in the Crimea and what this is generally going to be causing for the supply situation within the Oblast. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so jumping to the poll right here, once again, it is about that key bridge that Ukraine destroyed completely today that connected the Russian-occupied Ukrainian territories with Crimea. So, like it says, what is Ukraine's main goal? And 61% said to isolate Crimea and drive Russia out. 29% said it's about destroying the Russian frontline logistics. And 5% said it's all about causing civil distress and unrest to make the Russians uncomfortable to stay in Crimea. And I am actually with the 29%. What Ukraine's doing here is not aimed at the civilian population, so it's not really about, driving the Russian civilians out of Crimea. That'll be secondary. That'll come later on down the road. But this is all about destroying the Russian frontline logistics. Because if that bridge is destroyed, that means no Russian supply vehicles can cross from Crimea into the Ukrainian occupied territories, inside of the Ukrainian territory, of course. And that means they can't cross over and give those supplies to the Russian frontline soldiers. So that's why I say it's about frontline logistics. And it's clearly working because we've already seen the Kinburn-Spit Russian forces start a withdrawal from that area. So it obviously worked. I'm sure the Russians are probably crapping their pants advance over that because they're already complaining and begging Putin to help because they're suffering so badly on the front. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the situation is pretty bad, and I think they're trying to force the Crimeans, generally the Russians, out of the Crimean Peninsula by making the position in Crimea as strategically untenable as the positions that we're now seeing in the very western fringes of the Kherson Oblast. This appears to be a concentrated and coordinated Ukrainian drone and air campaign to destroy all of Russia's rear-line supply apparatus to force the Russian forces into either a retreat or being broken through on the front and then forced to surrender via an envelopment or being destroyed by a Ukrainian encirclement. Either way, the Ukrainians are going to be ensuring that the Russians will be pulling out of the area whether they want to remain there or not. And they've done that quite smartly by targeting and destroying all of their supply lines and largely rendering them non-existent within most areas of the southern front. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are going to be moving on into Moscow now for this wonderful and succulent news of the cars that have exploded spontaneously in Moscow. Very unfortunate. You know, they do that from time to time. But moving us on into the videos, we did get to see this first clip here of the aftermath of a car that appears to have spontaneously combusted within the area of Moscow. You see the police surrounding the scene.
Oh, I've heard of car issues. You know, occasionally like car manufacturers will say, oh, look, the accelerator's sticking. Like it sticks at like 100 miles an hour and you just run into a brick wall. Let's do a recall. I've never heard of a spontaneous explosion recall. That's a bit of an interesting one.
You know, I actually heard, Matthew, that there's a group of car mechanics out there that weirdly enough have like an odd track record of every time they work on a car, they like end up spontaneously combusting. I actually found a picture of them right here. And I got to tell you, I wouldn't really trust these guys to work on my car.
Goons. They call them goons. Brand new term. We just coined it. Goons. That's who wears these masks right here.
Also, you can tell these guys mean business because of the little snub-nosed Smith & Wesson they got right there on the table. That really just lets you know that they mean business. Not the balaclavas and the weird green like Mao outfits and all that. It's really just that Smith & Wesson. That's it.
Man, I tell you, Smith & Wesson sitting there at the table like he's got a say in the matter or something like that, the way he's just sitting there like that. I tell you what, that Smith & Wesson, though, that thing will have you moving like an invasive species if you're not careful.
Man, in the meanwhile, though, they apparently don't trust it well enough because the two guys in the back appear to be holding Glocks. So apparently Smith & Wesson is just there for symbolic reasons. Like apparently this is like that staff they have in the British Parliament that they have to put in place for Parliament to be in session. I guess that's like the IRA's version of that is the Smith & Wesson, the snub-nosed one particularly. Man.
Also, by the way, man, what's up with these ungodly sized hands this dude on the left over here has? Am I seeing things, or am I seeing shit, or has he got like 12 or 15 fingers on that hand?
He has 12 fingers, including his thumbs. It's a bit of a defect, you see. He was around back in the day during like during the Windscale nuclear disaster in Britain. It was an unfortunate side effect. But you know they call him handsy because you see he doesn't actually attack his opponents like in the British Army and stuff with like a rifle, like a FAL or Smith & Wesson. You see what he does is he just reaches out with his giant hands and claps them together and just crushes people with them. That's why they call him handsy. That's why they have him at the table. He's just there for the intimidation effect.
You know what they say when they got big hands? You know what they say about that? Not that anybody asked, but you know, his hands are as big as his head. And look, it's as big as his head. He wears a hat the same size as his hands wear, they say.
Let me see. Let me go pull up if I can find this here really quickly.
Oh, these goons are gonna be coming for us next too. They'll be like, they're disrespecting us. It's like, hey, this.
We actually have a picture here of Hansi in war. Here he is, right here in combat.
Damn, they call him Goon Scissorhands. That's what they call him.
man, I tell you. But anyways, moving on from the IRA jokes, because every single time a car explodes, we do have to mention the IRA. We also have another clip here showing another car going off in Moscow. Take a little gander at this one. Here it goes.
Wow. Man. That's like back in the day when the civilians were doing that to people up in New York.
Man, honestly, man, this is gonna be flashbacks of London back in the 80s. Like, damn. But then the car alarms just went off for a little while. We then got another clip here actually showing another one of these exploding in Moscow. This was in a totally different area. And this one is the most interesting of the three that we have on film, at least.
This is also, by the way, like in all seriousness, this is a pretty big deal because for the Ukrainians to, I would assume the Ukrainians did it, for them to get this many operatives to do this many hits all in one day like this on presumably high-profile Russian targets, that's not good for the FSB. I thought they were supposed to be world-class, you know, the return of the KGB. What's up with this?
It is interesting. It's showing a great deal of coordination and also concealment because apparently none of them were caught. We didn't even hear of the FSB announcing beforehand that they had caught any bombs mounted on the cars. So it appears that this entire operation went right under the noses of the Russian FSB. see. And this car attack right here that we're watching the firefighters deal with is the most interesting because according to some claims that we've been able to hear, apparently who was inside of that car was a Russian lieutenant general. We don't know the exact name of the officer or what command he was in charge of, but lieutenant generals are fairly high up within the Russian command structure. And considering that this one was in Moscow, he's most likely working directly out of the Ministry of Defense building just south of the Kremlin. We're not, once again, entirely sure of who he was and why he was directly targeted in this attack today, but a very interesting one to say the least. And once again, showing us that the Ukrainian armed forces are starting to use covert, more, I guess you could say, under the table sorts of actions to make sure to get at the top Russian brass, considering that most of the top Russian brass are no longer targetable or hittable near to the area of the front lines. They've been far removed from the area after a lot of them got schwacked by the Ukrainians early on in the war. But moving us on out of everything that's happening inside of the Russian Federation, it's now time for us to get on into the frontline scenario. We do know of the ongoing drone attack that we are covering right now, and we can confirm that the veneer progress plant has been hit within Cheboksary, which is about 1,000 kilometers into the Russian Federation, and I'm trying to visually identify where Cheboksary is right now on the map. Unfortunately, folks, I don't know what it is. I've geolocated Cheboksary a million times. I can't see it on the map right now. It's somewhere within this Volga area, I'm pretty sure. Let me go type it in, because I'm very sure that it's where I was looking. I just can't, for some reason, spot it. Yep, it was. I don't know why in the hell I couldn't spot that, but they did hit Cheboksary, and they did hit the veneer progress plant again. So moving us on out of that, it is time for us to get on into the front lines. Moving us into our location unknowns, we were able to see that the Russians had put out another abomination today in the Rodnik segment. I don't know what the hell this is.
Oh man, it's almost like they were clearly trying to build a turret on the top of it. What was it supposed to be, like the Russian Gopnik version of a Humvee or something? Like, I'm like, what the hell? Also, by the way, are those fake, like faux, like rocket pods on the side?
No, those actually look to be depth charges, and no, they're real. Like they're 100% real, I believe. And also, I don't know what's up with the small mortar that they have mounted to the hood, but I don't really know how that actually is supposed to work or how they fire that thing.
The one thing that saved the entire project is the blue tape on the front. Without that blue stripe right there, which they could call a go faster stripe, this thing right here could have been much slower than it could achieve right now. Like somebody said the LARP award over there in the comments, honestly.
Honestly, at the top of the lot, Aniva, it appears that they have a collection of trash that they found in a dumpster in downtown LA, and they just put it all together to make this sort of a facsimile turret that's now sitting on top of the thing. We don't really know if that turret actually works, whether it rotates, or whether the gun can legitimately swivel in that thing. I'm doubting all of that. But there is some sort of a turret they built on top of this thing. We're just not sure if it's operational or if there's any field of view out of it. Still, this is one of the ugliest things that we've seen made in the war so far, and it deserved to be on the news summary today because of how damn bad off it looks. So moving us on out of that, we've also been able to see additionally the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours. And holy moly!
Oh, +4 Bobcats. I love to see that. That's a very good thing that they got right there. I must say it's a very good thing, but tell us more.
And it is pretty impressive to see. Over the past 24 hours, we've been able to hear the Misty Secure the Record stated that the Russians are losing about 1,300 troops a day. 382 supply trucks is the 9th highest daily loss. Special equipment correct total is 4,263, and ground robotic complexes were lost in the number of 7 today, which is the 9th highest, which unfortunately is not shown on this infographic. Over the past 24 hours, we have been able to confirm that 1,370 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 5 APCs, 382 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 75 artillery pieces, 2,103 drones, 4 MLRSs, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 4 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, a pretty impressive day and a good thing to see. Moving us on from that, we also got to see in the Belgorod area that there were some attacks conducted on the city today.
СИЗО там. Это еще конкретно прилет был.
She just said that that's the concrete plant, actually, so apparently it was a concrete plant that got blown up.
Yeah, I guess it's not concrete anymore. Call that thing Bondo.
I would have to say, I think one thing is concrete, the attack. That's concrete fact at this point. I can't tell you what this guy's saying. He's slurring his speech too hard. We can also see this one here as well. And we can also see the smoke rising from this direction.
Крепко. Громко.
I gotta say, folks, there's a very interesting, dissection in how Russians speak between men and women. Women actually speak in legible Russian, and every man in Russia, when they're talking on a camera, they sound like they're blitzed to hell. You can't even understand what they're saying because it's so slurred. Like the woman said, "Это конкретно plan," something like that. It was it's the concrete plan. It's okay, I can get that. And then the dude's like, oh boy, oh my. It's like, I don't even know what he's saying. Like, I wish I could tell you all what he was saying. I don't even have a damn clue. But this lady just said something like, wow, that's unbelievable, like, effing crazy, all that. But anyways, moving us on out of that, we also get to see the Ukrainians blew up a pontoon bridge near to the Vovchansk area that was attempting to be deployed, but they destroyed it before it could even get there. These are pontoon bridges, by the way. Before anyone says that the battle barge thing that we saw last time was a pontoon, this is a legitimate pontoon bridge layer, but both of them were destroyed before they could even lay one. And we can also confirm that these are on the Vovchansk front because they have the Vovchansk theater markings on the hood. So, moving us on out of these clips, we also get to see within the Kupiansk area that the Ukrainian armed forces were also cooking Russians in this area as a part of the 9th Brigade. We see them here doing their little speech and moving on in with that sick music. That's me when I stepped on a Lego. But don't mention Legos and American fork, folks. That could get you in trouble.
Yeah, goodness, that's a lot of mess with that right there. Jeez. Oh, man. Also, I heard people are going around getting in fights over that stuff now, going in stores and stuff like that and fighting people. I mean, people are really getting out there with that.
Man, honestly, they're getting unreal with that sort of stuff. I mean, I heard folks that apparently instead of something being given around at some, like secondhand Lego stores, instead of handing out Legos, they handing out fists. I don't really think that's on the product list, but
they said this is Brick City. I know it's not Brick City. They're handing out something else, but it's not bricks.
Man, they said bricks and mini fists. It's like, damn, it's like they're going crazy out there. But moving us on out of that whole news that's going on with that whole deal, just kind of south of us a little bit, we've also been able to hear that within the area of Slopiano-Sversk, there was a strike within the Luhansk area, which we could see in these clips.
Еще один летит, да. А ну, еще раз поворот работает, нет? Ой.
We hear the drone in the distance.
Who's moaning?
Полетел.
How many of you had to drink tonight, sir?
Too much. Oh, we can see some sort of light in the distance finally.
Надо работает, нет?
We hear it. It's getting farther away now.
Но. Он подлетает где-то.
Oh, it's getting closer. It sounds, at least. We're working entirely off of sound here, folks.
Ну, шел.
Can't really tell you what it's doing now. It's kind of like fading in and fading out.
Don't worry, this man will moan when it hits.
Ну да. О, отработало. Сейчас будет рохот.
Oh! And there's the impact.
Отработало.
This has startled the Russian. We also got in this clip as well the sound of a child, apparently. It's now silent. Here's something like teething on the phone. It's probably the kid. Oh, and we hear someone getting slammed into a trash can outside.
That's the neighborhood gang throwing Ivan down the trash can for not paying his debts.
Hey kid, do you want to learn what happens when you do not pay? Like shit like that. It's like, damn, they don't play down here.
Man, they thought Corn Pop was a menace around town. They should see Ivan on the weekend.
Man, they back in Scranton they had Corn Pop. Over here in Luhansk they've got Pickle Vadim. Like you don't want to know why they call him Pickle. But moving this on from that, we also were able to see down in the Olchevsk area that there was an ammo depot hit in this area as well. We could see 2 pictures of it right here on fire, so that's quite nice. We love to see it. And we also were able to additionally see within the Kramatorsk and Slavyansk area that Russian forces were continuing to get hit by Ukrainian MLRS fire, which we saw in this clip. That's actually a Humvee MLRS. These have been used a decent bit by the Ukrainians in recent times, and they're still being used quite well, as this clip suggests. Moving us on out of that clip, it's now time for us to move on down into the area kind of close to the Pokrovsk in the southern front. But before we get on into that, many people are talking about those Russian officers that were getting obliterated today in Moscow and when their cars spontaneously combusted. And a lot of people are wondering what's going on with that and what are the Ukrainians planning to do with this. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so what's up with the cars exploding around Moscow seemingly at random? Even though we know it's definitely not random, it seems to be at random. So what's likely going on here? 56% said Ukraine is taking out Russian officers, while 19% said Russian partisans are getting back at Putin, and 17% says it seems like it could be the FSB purging the top Russian officers. And I'll be honest with you, these days you really can't tell if the Russians are the ones doing the hitting or the Ukrainians are the ones doing it, because sometimes the Russians are their own worst enemy to a large degree. The one thing that does catch my attention, though, is typically, and especially when they're in war, it would seem like these Russian officers would probably have like a mirror on a stick. Because if y'all didn't know, when people, like for example, intel officers are deployed forward and they're deployed into a foreign country, they usually pull out this long stick with a mirror on the end of it, and they'll wand it underneath their car before they get into it at the morning, just to make sure there's not a car bomb on there. But apparently, the Russian officers didn't do that. They just simply got in the car, put the key in the ignition, turned it on, and then apparently they found out. Apparently, some of them did. So I would say I'm actually a little bit undecided on this. I'm not sure if it's the Ukrainians doing it or the FSB doing it, their own people, that they could feel is turning on them to a certain degree. Because remember, Putin's very paranoid. So I'm not so sure who's doing it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say that it's probably the Ukrainians taking out some Russian officers. Usually these sorts of strikes are conducted by Ukrainian partisans within the Moscow area working in conjunction with the Ukrainian SBU. And we have seen that strikes like these have happened before. Funnily enough, one time they put a bomb in a motor scooter. Like I don't even know, like an electric scooter is what I mean to say. I don't even know how they did it, but it was absolutely insane and it worked. So I would say that this is definitely most likely a continuation of the Ukrainian strikes in the past, which really are doing nothing but just sowing paranoia in the Russian command. If they take one of these guys out, they just replace them the next day. So it doesn't really do a lot of at least impact in real sense to the Russians' position in the war, but it is keeping the Russian generals in Moscow in fear, which might keep their minds on other things rather than doing their jobs to the best of their abilities if they were doing that anyways. So I hope that has addressed that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is time for us to move on down and into the area of the Zaporizhia front. There has been a lot of news to happen down here today that we did not get to yet, but we will be making sure to get to it now. Moving us on to the area of Starom Lenivka, we got to see that the FPV cables are now all over the place. Just look at them. It's like a spider web.
I saw that the birds were starting to take this stuff and they were cutting it with their beaks and they were making nests out of it.
Man, honestly, man, I didn't think that there were any birds left. I thought the North Koreans ate them all on Tuesday.
Now, they hadn't got here yet, but trust me, once they arrive, though, if the birds disappear, the North Koreans have arrived in the region.
Man, honestly, that's real. We also got to see that some radars and other installations were hit by Ukrainian long-range drone forces, including that air search radar, this facility, and a couple of other buildings as well. This is just the intro to spice things up, but now it's time for us to get into the meat of the matter. This was a air search radar that was hit a P-18 Tarek in the Zaporizhia Oblast. We can see the shitty thing right here.
That looks really janky.
And now they're going to destroy it. There's the radar array exposed above ground, and there's the hit directly onto it.
They improved it.
A blazing inferno. They're now going to hit the Tarek again. This is the same one. This one's near to Ivanivka in the Zaporizhia Oblast. Or Ivanivka, if I can say it correctly. But we can see the hit here as well on this one inside of the dugout. We now see them striking a Rubicon unit in the Zaporizhia Oblast as well. You see the first hit right there. And you know something, folks? The spirit of Obama has overwhelmed them as they're doing a double tap. Hit him with a double tap. And they hit him right there.
Damn.
Now you see in the Donetsk Oblast, they're now going for another Russian position. This one appears to be home to the 228th Regiment, or at least some elements of it. You see them blowing it to pieces right there, and a second drone coming in for a double tap, as everything's better when it's done twice.
They get that bing bing bong treatment.
You now see another one coming in on an electrical substation, unfortunately in an unknown location. I didn't get to read the text below. And we see another hit on the electrical substation. This is most likely around Melitopol, I would assume. And this is actually in Mariupol. This is Mariupol in the Donetsk Oblast where the substation's at. And it's cooking nicely. Now we can see them once again going after another target. What the hell was that? Did you see that?
What was it?
Look at this. This thing. Look at that thing go. I don't know what that was, but it went flying.
Oh man, it's the orb. I'm going to start it up again. It's the orb. Go back. That is actually interesting though. Like that's an unusual flight path. Like unnatural almost.
Well, whatever it was,
I think it ricocheted off of something. Actually, did you notice that it almost like impacted the ground? Let's see.
I think that was an artifact.
Yeah, it was an artifact. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, really. I don't know. I'm not even going to spend more time on it. It's just something flying at Mach 5 through the front area where the drone's hitting. But then we saw the drone hit the target successfully once again, another substation around Mariupol. We now see the Ukrainians hitting it again.
Could it have been an alien creature from the future on the Ukrainian battlefield trying to get a look at it and was bouncing around in Mach 5 trying to get out of the atmosphere?
God forbid.
Who knows?
God forbid.
To check back in after this 10-minute advertising break, though, we'll make some bank on you, and then you come back and find out it's all bogus.
Tony, it's that black magic. That sick wizard shit. Man, shit.
That was weird, though. I will say that. I'm not going to create like a whole thing out of it, but I think the chat's going to do that for us anyway. But it was kind of odd, though. Very, very abrupt change of flight path, going very fast. So sort of weird.
I will say this, though. The Ukrainians must be electricians, the way they've blown up these substations all over Mariupol. This is like the fourth one they've hit now. And here they go again. This is actually a substation in Luhansk. Oh my god. Man, honestly, I would hate to be an electrician right now in the occupied territories. You're at work every day, all day, just repairing what was blown up.
Also, by the way, someone in the chat said, enforcers, I'm just curious, how come we spend so much time talking about the Iranian attacks and the impacts of their attack, but no discussion of the U.S. hitting their targets inside of Iran? That's mainly because we don't have photo and video evidence of what the U.S. did, because the U.S. isn't publishing that. At least right now they're not. So it's hard to assess it if we don't have any, visual evidence to work with. Meanwhile, we had a ton of videos coming out of the Gulf states. That means people were posting them all over the place. But the Iranians don't want to let their people put stuff out on the internet, so we didn't have any of that. That's why.
Yeah, we can only talk about what we cover, or what we have to cover. I can't really go on and on and on about a U.S. strike in Iran when we don't even get to see what they hit. If you understand what I'm saying. Like, if a tree falls in the woods and you're not around, does it make a sound? Kind of a question. And I can't really talk about the sound a tree made when it fell in the woods if we're not around to be able to hear it, if you get what I'm saying. And that's the same thing with video and picture evidence. If the U.S. bombs something and we have no video and picture evidence of it, all we can do is say they bombed something, and that's the end of it. We can't analyze what the hit did, what kind of impact it had, what kind of a system it destroyed. We don't have any of that information to work with, and we also don't have a video to dissect either. So that's why U.S. strikes get absolutely no attention. If you would like for us to give it attention, you could write to the Office of the President of the United States, or you could write to the Secretary of Defense and request that they start to be a lot more transparent with the strike footage that they clearly have, as they do have footage of those strikes happening in the Department of Defense, but they don't post any of them to the public. If you would like for us to cover it more, which I'd be more than happy to, you can write to those two people or those two individuals and see if they'll listen to you and become a lot more transparent, so we can spend more time covering it and analyzing it on air. But moving us on out of that, we also were able to see another clip from the Zaporizhia front showing Russian artillery getting destroyed by the Ukrainian 55th Separate Artillery Brigade. This is what's called counter battery action. Actually, it looks like there's some Russians hiding behind that net, but they hit the oil barrel instead. You know, that oil barrel is pretty pricey these days. One day it can be $120 per barrel, or the next day it can be $80. It just depends on how the oil traders wake up and feel. And we see here some further actions, and I see the same person saying, I don't mean to sound argumentative. You're not sounding argumentative at all. I'm just explaining to you the problem and where it can be, where you can write to hopefully help us try and fix it. But they said, could you talk about the locations? Well, the locations are so broad, we just can't really talk about them because there's so many different things in an area that can be hit, and that's why it just comes down to they blew something up there, and then we have to move on.
And you were getting aggressive with him, man. I was like, dang, you're getting aggressive on him. I was like, I don't think you meant it like that. But, man, you're going at him.
Well, no, I mean, I'm more so getting exasperated. My tone sounding angry. I'm getting more so exasperated, not at the question, but at the lack of transparency by the Department of Defense. That's why I was saying, if you want anyone to fix it, you can write to them, because it's really aggravating and incredibly infuriating, folks, that we can get endless libraries daily of footage from Ukraine, from the Ukrainian armed forces, and yet the U.S. military acts like every single thing that they do has to be classified to the extreme these days with absolutely no transparency whatsoever. It becomes really aggravating because it makes it impossible for us to give the full breadth of coverage that we would like to do for the U.S. strikes in Iran, because we literally have nothing to talk about and nothing to show, and footage is very scarce. So whenever we do get footage, we try and break it down and analyze it the best we can, but it's just so few and far in between we can hardly give any attention to it. But moving us on from that and on up into the rest of the Zaporizhia front, we also can see air defenses within the Zaporizhia region here in these clips. We hear them dogs. We see some flashes in the distance, looks like possible air defense fire. And now we just got blinded by flashing, and now we see a cat. Everything that we can see.
The cat's like us, the cat's like, damn, man, you gotta turn that like 1,000 lumen fluorescent light.
Man, honestly, man, the cat looks shocked. He had his head all the way back. It's like, what the hell, man? But here's another clip of the air defense. Something hit. Moving us on to the next clip. You see the explosion of a drone right there. That was apparently a flashlight at the end of that clip as well. And then the last clip here, which is actually a duplicate of the first clip we showed you all from the series. We also get to see another clip of more strikes within the Zaporizhia region, a picture here showing an ongoing fire, and another one there showing another explosion. Near to the Melitopol area, we also were able to hear of other explosions and reports of explosions within the Zaporizhia region and Melitopol, which we were able to see were largely duplicate clips. So moving us on finally out of the front lines and all the news that we had within these areas, it is now time for us, folks, to get on into what we can hopefully describe as the cherry on top for the night, which I have to say, folks, sadly is not going to be the case. I was hoping we'd have a speech from Zelensky to give a little bit of a breather and a break to the show. Turns out that Zelensky has not made a speech since the 5th of June, so we actually don't have a speech to show y'all tonight, unfortunately. So with that actually rounds out our news segment for the day. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and it's been an absolute honor and pleasure for all of y'all to be here. They should stick around, by the way, because we still have a lot to go. We have a myriad of super chats and live chats to address here in this question segment, and we always get into some interesting conversations and rabbit holes during these question segments, so we'll be making sure to get into that right here and right now. I do have to tell you folks, it's going to be a little bit of a lengthier show tonight because the news took about 2 hours and 42 minutes to cover, including the breaking news that came out earlier in the day, so we're probably going to be here for a 4-hour show, most likely tonight, to be able to make sure that we get to answer all the questions and give you all the time that you all deserve for supporting the channel and also spending your time here to watch it. So with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's now time to jump into our super chats, our live chats, and our Morse code decoders of the stream. And we still got some good questions to go, so stick around for it, by the way. And if you're wondering, what happened, man? What happened to the breaking